Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Thousand Calorie Cheese Sauce, our podcast where we mainly talk about movies and other things that we like to talk about. Um, I'm Saki, and I'll introduce my co-host Mohsin.
Hello everyone, I'm Mohsin, otherwise known as Sundown Rider. Uh, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I think our introductions are pretty much going to be pretty standard these days now, just you and me. But yeah, today's episode we're mainly going to be talking about. It's kind of going to be a roundup of 2021. We haven't got a particular movie to talk about today. I know that we were talking about maybe considering watching Kingsman, but I'm not the most biggest fan of that film, so we decided to kind of forego that film. Our episodes are not going to always talk about, the latest film out there. We'll be talking about other movies, but today we just wanted to talk about things that we did last year, games we may have played. Actually, I was talking to you about it before. I didn't think I actually did much in 2021 in terms of watching stuff, but I actually have quite the long anime list that I've watched and movies for that matter. I've got on my phone. It shows you what you've watched on Odeon, and Odeon's the cinema that we usually go to. And yeah, I'd seen quite a few films this year, especially once the cinemas opened back up again after lockdown.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, how was to start off with? How was 2021 for you? I know you had some interesting stuff go down because you started working in London and you moved back to where we are in Birmingham.
Yeah, so actually no, I think 2021 for the entirety of 2021 I was in Birmingham.
Yeah,
So last year was cool. There was nothing really there was nothing really stopping me from watching anything or reading anything. I wasn't like living away. But it's kind of my usual kind of the thing that I stick to is I don't really tend to watch very many anime. The only anime I've really watched recently were the first season of Demon Slayer, and then the movie of Demon Slayer, otherwise known as Kimetsu no Yaiba. I haven't really watched anything besides that. I watched like the Attack on Titan, but a lot later than everybody else. I'm more of a manga reader than an anime watcher. And so even with like the ones that I used to cover on my channel, things like One Piece, One Punch Man, Naruto, all these Bleach, well, those ones I think we watched those together and then separately as well. But then things like Seven Deadly Sins, Nanatsu no Taizai. What else did I
I tell you
used to
something we
cover?
did watch. We could talk about it quite a bit actually. Is Doctor Stone?
Oh yeah, Doctor Doctor Stone.
So that's a
And then there was
very popular anime,
what about
and
what
me
about the
and you watched
basketball
that
one?
together.
What was the basketball one we watched?
Kuroko no Basketball.
Yeah,
Or
Kuroko
basket
no
actually,
Basket. Yeah,
Kuroko no
yeah,
basket.
basket.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Kuroko's basketball. I'd watched that before, and I thought I'd show it to you. It was kind of twofold. I wanted to see your reaction. I enjoyed it for what it was. I kind of struggle with sports anime, and I know you do as well. We have a friend, one of our best mates. He he hates sports anime for the most part, although he did like Haikyuu, which is a volleyball anime.
Hmm.
I do remember him saying that he enjoyed watching that. I couldn't watch that. I watched a bit of the first season, uh, and it kind of struggled to resonate with me. I think that's the thing with sports anime. For me, it has to resonate in a way. The first one I ever watched, and I know it's the same for you. Ishio 21,
Yeah, yeah.
repping American football. I got my Tampa Bay Bucks jersey on. But yeah, that's how I actually got into American football. And I can't remember how you got into it because Ishio 21, I got introduced to it in secondary school. I learned about American football, but through the manga, and the rules in the manga and like high school Japanese American football are very different to NFL, which is something I got into a few years later through our best friend as well. The same best friend who has been telling me to watch American football for years. And I finally did in like 2011, and we both started watching it together. Um, But yeah, Aisho 21 was the first one that I watched, and then years later I watched Kuroko's
Mm,
basketball. Uh,
yeah,
but that
I
was a
wasn't.
fascinating one for you, though.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where it started off really well, and I was like, okay, this is promising. I'm enjoying where this is going. Kuroko, okay, cool, yeah, I like him. Then you had that, what was his name, Tora, the guy that always plays the Tora style character. What was his name? His kind of buddy on the main kind of ish character for Kuroko no Basket, the guy with the red, the
It called him.
you know the
I think it was. I can't remember his name, but it had something to do with light. I think it was like Agami or something. I can't remember. I mean,
yeah, so something, yeah, because they're talking about him being the light, him being the shadow, and I was like, okay, cool,
yeah,
Hikari or something, I don't
yeah. I mean,
know.
the main, for those you don't know, the main kind of story of Kuroko's basketball is, it's about high school basketball, and it's about this school. I can't remember the name, but it's a kind of average school for basketball. From my this is I'm going kind of off memory. It's kind of average school for high school basketball, and it manages to recruit. It's got a whole bunch of freshmen that it's recruiting, and they managed to get this really big, this big scary looking guy, who's like tall, strong, and it ends up he's really good at basketball. But they also recruit this really small guy who just looks like a weakling, and his name is Kuroko. And it's about how they form a basketball team and end up being, their story and their to try and become the best high school basketball team. The backdrop being that small guy was the sixth player. So there's five aside in basketball, so it's 5v5. He was the sixth player who used to come off the bench to play for the best middle school basketball team, which was comprised of all these like super amazing middle school basketball players who each went their separate ways to different high schools. And it's about how they each defeat the teams or attempt to defeat the teams at these middle school. I can't remember what it was. It was the kind of I can't remember the name of they had like an era, the era of like amazing players or wherever it was.
Yeah,
But that's what they called them, and they didn't. So the five amazing players, they got all the shine, but this kind of small weakling Kuroko, he was their sixth man, but he's a really amazing player in his own way. He has a certain skill set, which is passing, and it's about how he adapts and how the team and how the big scary guy we can't remember his name, how they form this team and then become really good at high school basketball and their struggles. So yeah, it's a really good show. The thing is, for shows, sports anime, you have to suspend your belief in a way. It's there's a whole bunch of just you're just like, in reality this would never happen. I know you had some
yeah,
issues with that.
it went too far for me because there were parts where I was like, "Ooh, that's cool" and stuff like that. You know, a lot like Eye Shield, but I think Eye Shield, from what I remember, kept it relatively like there weren't things which were too insane. In reality, all it was, "Oh, this guy's really strong. Oh, this guy's reach is really sick," and the way they over dramatize all of that. That was cool. That's okay, yeah, cool. But in reality, all that it is that this Shin guy or whatever, he's really strong, has a really good reach, all that type of stuff. Senna is really fast. The Panther, he's super fast. I get all that. That was cool.
In
But
Aisha
with
21, you mean?
yeah. But with Kuroko no Basket, they went way too far with like there's adding the drama to like their abilities, and then there's like just complete bullshittery. And that's what Kuroko no Basket got to. It got to a point where I was like, man, this is just like these are stupid things that are happening now. It'd be like, oh yeah, it's kind of like the one of the last arcs in Bleach, which I think is going to be animated. It's the last arc for Bleach actually,
The
where
Thousand
things were
Year Blood
happening.
War.
Yeah, the Thousand Year Blood War arc, which is going to be sick, but it's also going to be like it's going to be you're going to get two sides of the coin. You're going to
Asshole
get the sick
Deluxe.
side, and it's going to be like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then you're going to get the oh my god, this is complete bullshit. You're gonna get that, and that's what kind of going back to Kuroko no Basket. That's what it became. It was just like powers piled on top of powers, mixing powers,
Yeah.
and then it got silly, man. I was like, nah,
The thing
this
is,
is
I think I realized how ridiculous it was when I started watching it with you. I knew it was kind of
yeah,
it was silly before, But then when I was watching with you, it was kind of like a realization because you didn't really say much. Like we don't really say much while we're watching. But while I was watching, I was like, man, this really is a bunch of bullshit. Like, like how the hell did he pull that off? Like, yeah, so it's crazy. Um, so yeah, I mean that was an interesting show for the at the very least, and I still enjoy it. I still need to watch the rest of the second season and some of the third season again, but I've finished it once before anyway. The other thing, I mean, I know that the other thing I watched with you was Doctor Stone.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Me and you watched that, and I mean, kind of spoiler alert, we both thought it was a pile of shit. To put it kindly, I struggled so much to enjoy that because, I mean, like generally shonen anime for what they are, I enjoy them. Like, like I understand, like this is a shonen anime. There's certain tropes. That anime, if you've watched anime for, I mean, God knows how many years us two have been watching anime at this point. Since we were in secondary school, so probably a good.
Even before that.
Yeah, well, before that it was stuff that was on TV. So, I mean, in the UK, the only anime that they used to air was on like Cartoon Network or Toonami, which were like two separate channels. And it started off on Cartoon Network where they used to broadcast Dragon Ball Z in this country, and that was early 2000s, late 90s probably.
And we had Gundam as well.
Gundam Wing as well. That was awesome. It used to come on quite late from what I remember because we never used to really watch it. And also, it was one of those plots which, when we were younger, kind of went over our heads a little bit, rather than Dragon Ball Z, which was just people kicking the shit out of each other.
Yep.
I mean, and those really were the only. I mean, apart from Pokemon and Digimon, which they're quite heavily localized, so I'm not sure like how anime I would consider them, but they are anime regardless. But yeah, I mean, when we could finally, it was in secondary school where I could actually, when we had access to the internet, that we could finally choose to watch anime of our choice, and it was mainly, subtitled. Some stuff was dubbed, Rurouni Kenshin and all that kind of thing. But yeah, like, it was one of those few anime that we watched together, experienced together. Like, it wasn't one that I'd watched beforehand, and then I said to you, "Come on, let's watch this together." It was, we heard this anime was really good, and we were gonna experience it together. And we were also in the same house, which also helps. Obviously, as I mentioned, the London stuff wasn't actually last year. You moved back to Birmingham in 2020. Was it like March 2020?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was around March, so pretty much the first lockdown for us in the UK from COVID. And you've been back here since, and I've been working from home, but I work in Birmingham rather than London. But we've been both working from home in the same house. But yeah, I mean, let's break down Dr. Stone quickly. The kind of general story is that you break down, give like a quick summary if you can for that.
Yeah, so the quickest summary you'll get is there's the main character who I've forgotten his name as well. I've forgotten all of their names and all this thingy. But the main character, the one with the really crazy hair, a lot of them have really crazy hair in Dr. Stone.
The art style is amazing.
Yeah, art style, but we gotta give props where props are due. The art style for Dr. Stone, the mangaka for Dr. Stone, he's amazing.
Isn't
and
it?
By the way,
Aisho 21 guy.
No, it's not Yusuke Murata. It's not him.
Who is it?
It's some other dude. I've forgotten his name. It's like Boichi, I think.
I thought it was somebody that we were familiar with. Like we'd watched something from the guy beforehand.
I think it's Boichi. Is his name? I'm pretty sure it's Boichi. But it's essentially about this kid who really enjoys. Well, I say kid. He's probably about like 15, 16.
High schoolers.
You know how Sean.
He's a high schooler.
High schooler in Japan. He really enjoys science to the point where he's very scientifically.
He's
not
obsessive.
Just gifted, he's talented. He's obsessed with it. He is pretty much a scientist in a 15, 16-year-old's body.
Yeah.
He knows all of this stuff. His dad was like a part of a space program, all this type of stuff. And he has a best mate who's really interested in this girl. Suddenly the world goes to shit. This huge green light goes off. Everyone in the world sees it. And the entire world, every human on the planet, not even humans actually, every living thing by the looks of things, becomes petrified. And they all become stoned as if like Medusa glared at them. Then like hundreds, I think thousands of years later, you get that kid, the scientist dude. He breaks out of the petrification. So then it's him trying to unpetrify people trying to figure out how that works, trying to figure out the best way to do it. Are there any drawbacks, all that type of stuff. So he unpetrifies people. He unpetrifies his best mate first, and then they try and unpetrify somebody else. But then they get into a tiny scuffle with like a lion or a tiger or something like that that had somehow been unpetrified or had unpetrified itself through kind of similar means. And then this once again this really intelligent but this really strong dude comes out, and his ethos is very, and kind of his ideology is very different to the main character. The main character is like, I'm gonna unpetrify everyone regardless of who they are, whereas this dude is like, I'm gonna unpetrify only the best, only the people who are fit for survival. All these adults and stuff which have ruined the world and made it what it was millennia ago, I'm gonna let them die. In fact, I'm gonna kill them while they're petrified. So then you get two separate kingdoms which are made. One is this kingdom of science, and one is the kingdom of like the survival of the fittest kind of mentality. And then it's kind of how they are at odds with one another, and the story continues from there.
Yeah, and this is basically the first season, and it was quite long for a first season, if I remember correctly. It wasn't your standard. I mean, a standard Japanese anime season lasts for about 12 episodes, 12, 13 episodes. I think this was like the 2 seasons worth of anime. I think it was about 20 something episodes.
Yeah, it might have been about 24, I think.
Yeah, maybe. You sometimes get the double length kind of anime. But yeah, it was the main kind of, I suppose, the hook for the anime is how this guy, looks. He has, amazing recall ability, obviously, to remember all the science and stuff that he's learnt, and to use that to basically survive and to resurrect all these people. They're not dead, but just to unpetrify them, like you said. And the thing that really put us off this anime was how unrealistic the science became, where it was like basically the guy was doing witchcraft almost. It wasn't really science. I remember if you guys don't want any spoilers, like towards the end, like some of the shit they were pulling off was ridiculous. You were like, cavemen couldn't have done this shit even with the knowledge, because they just didn't have the resources at the time. And that's basically what they were reduced to at this in the future, as it were. They were reduced to cavemen, and he was pulling out all this stuff using science. He made a CD, remember?
Yeah,
From stone.
Like his dad made a CD or something, and it wasn't even a CD. It was a
CD player.
It was like a vinyl disc kind of thing.
Yeah, and I was just like, come on, dude, like seriously.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was like the least of the kind of unbelievable things. But I think there was quite a few things that put us off, and it was very tropey.
Very tropey. But I think the main thing that put me off, and maybe the same thing for you, was I didn't really care so much how whack the science got. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. It's an anime, it's a shonen, whatever. It was just that kind of that premise is what stuck with it. It was just, oh, we're gonna have a problem, whether it be like, and the problem would be like some minuscule thing like, oh, the village needs electricity or something like that for some reason because I need to do this. So he had his kind of not even what they call ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And he would benefit the village in some way, but then also have his own reason for wanting to do something. This is the main character. But the thing is, it got to a point where I was just like, dude, I really couldn't give a shit about the science projects. Like, that's so uninteresting for me. Like, I understand it's a new kind of thing with this anime. Oh, they're doing science projects. But I was like, but it's boring. It's like, I'm not hyped for any of this. It's not like, oh, I wonder what they're going to do. It's, oh, okay, I know they're going to do something. This is just kind of gray. What do you want me to do?
I think that's a common thing. I think in shonen, they all have a hook, and if that hook lands with you, you'll fight to the death, like to prove to like, you're gonna show off that anime to your friends and stuff like that, and say, yeah, this is amazing. But if that hook doesn't land with one of your friends, or for you for that matter, there's nothing you can do. And that was one of those things. This was recommended by our cousin, Dr. Stone, as well. Before we watched it, it was recommended by Biju. And it just didn't land for either of us. I was hoping it would land with you, and I think you probably thought the same for me. Like, so you can explain, like, why is this good? But for both of us, it was one of those. It just wasn't landing.
I've been seeing, oh yeah, the anime had been popping off, and then I'd been looking at the manga, and I was like, yo, artwork is sick. The manga seemed to have been popping off. It was highly rated. Remember when we went to like Crunchyroll or something?
One of the highest rated anime I'd seen.
Yeah, so we were like, damn, cuz. We looked at the comments. People were like, oh my God, this is amazing. I've never tasted something like this in my life.
Oh man,
And then we
it's
watched
so
it and we were
stupid
just like,
because we were just
dude,
watching this. And we were like, come on, man, seriously, like
yeah.
this. Like, I'd watch better stuff than that last year alone. Like, and I mean, some people say that last year was a really good year for anime. I'm not sure about that one. I didn't really. I think the struggle wasn't necessarily that bad anime was coming out. It was I struggled to find something interesting to watch. So I don't just watch anything random. You look at the cover, you look at the pictures that come out. Um, I look at the tags, look at the synopsis, and I was struggling to find things that I found interesting as a hook to watch. One of the things that I mean, Doctor Stone, we both watched. One of the things that I watched recently was actually did you watch Demon Slayer last year or did you watch it the year before?
I think I might have watched it the year before,
I watched Demon
2020.
Slayer last year, so I was late to the party, and we both went to watch the Mugen Train movie in cinema,
Yeah, yeah,
and that was an awesome experience. I gotta say, I was
yeah.
surprised because my experience with anime movies is I generally don't watch them. I think I was burnt out when we were younger, and they used to put on the Dragon Ball Z movies, and they were good
Oh
for
yeah.
what they were, but they weren't particularly linked with the story in a way. They were kind of like a side story. So like the Broly. I mean, there were amazing movies like the Broly movie
The
and
Bardock movie.
the Bard. That was a special. That wasn't necessarily a movie. I think that was like an
Yeah.
OVA kind of thing.
And then you had
Um,
like the Emperor Slug.
Trunks.
Yeah, yeah, the Trunks movie. You
Yeah,
had Turles, the Tree of Life one,
yeah.
or something like that. Loads of these movies.
That's the only anime where I've more or less seen all the movies, apart from I think a couple of the recent ones. And a lot of them are good. Some of them not so much. The Naruto ones, they didn't really land with me. I watched a
Yeah,
couple at
with
the beginning.
Naruto, with Naruto, we watched like the first two or three movies, and then from there, I was like, meh. And
Yeah,
then
I
Bleach, I
was
don't
kind of
think
like
we
I'm
watched
good.
it.
Yeah, I was kind of like I'm good. I mean, I think the last one, there's a movie which is like an epilogue to Shippuden.
Yeah.
That's worth a watch, but even that was a bit of cringe. It was kind of like a side story to do with like Hinata and Naruto.
Yeah. But
Naruto.
even the One Piece movies, there are meant to be quite a few good ones, like Gold and Z. What like, is like One Piece Z or something? I forgot what it was. And I just have no interest in any of them. And I've kept up with One Piece basically since I was very young. Same with like Naruto and Bleach, but they finished. But One Piece, I've just never had the desire to want to go and watch the movies because I'm just like, nah. Some of the cool things with like One Piece and even the other two, Naruto, Bleach, and whichever the movies there are, you'll always see like, oh, this guy has like a devil fruit which we've not seen before because it's in this movie, or this type of shinobi or this type of this type of soul reaper. His sword is like he has a bankai and no one knows about him and stuff like this. Oh, where did he come from? But because it was never like once again referred to in the actual story, like, oh, remember when we fought that guy and we did this, it always felt kind of like it was not part of the actual canon, which is where Mugen Train was different, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at in a way. So that was different, like you say to me, because it was canon. It was a straight sequel. So
Yeah,
where the first season of the anime finishes, the movie picks up from there, and I really like that. I thought that was awesome. What I really like, I mean, Demon Slayer. I think most anime fans agree. It's a bit overrated. It's especially I think if you live in Japan. From what I can tell, I over the last year I've been watching a lot of videos about Japan and like America, just travel videos. And from what I can tell, it's humongous, as as popular as it is on the internet and social media. Demon Slayer, it's absolutely nuts in Japan. It's completely over marketed. Everything is got like Demon Slayer, like I think they were saying McDonald's and like Starbucks coffee cup holders and all this thing. They've got Demon Slayer marketing all over the shop, And it's one of those where they're kind of taking it a bit too far, but it is really popular at the same time. Its sales are massive, but it is a bit overrated for what it is. It's don't get me wrong, I enjoy the hell out of it. It's a fantastic show, but it's not the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
are
yeah.
things
It's, I
wrong with
mean,
it, as there are with
yeah,
every anime.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as with all of most of these things that we watch, which are shonen, it is very shonen. It has the same type of formula, same types of tropes and all that type of stuff.
Yeah,
Cool because you get to see actual like deaths, which means something, and you're not a fan of deaths, but even in this case, I think you were like, okay, this was cool, and there will be spoilers in this, by the way. So if you've not watched Mugen Train, skip ahead.
I don't like deaths
Um,
for the sake of it. There's a difference,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
where it just feels like we're trying to be edgy.
yeah,
I don't like that, and you know my thoughts on Game of Thrones, and won't go into that on in this
yeah,
episode.
yeah.
But that's what it
We
felt
have,
like. What Game of Thrones felt like to me was just like we're just gonna kill off everybody, and you're never gonna be safe, and that's the main hook of our show. Who's gonna die next?
yeah,
And I'm just there like, I don't give a fuck.
yeah,
I seriously don't give a fuck. It's like-
yeah,
especially when all your characters are unlikable. But let's, I
yeah.
I digress.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
what were we talking about? So yeah, Mugen Train. We went to watch that in
Mugen
cinema,
Train, yeah.
and the difficult thing for them to pull off, I thought, was the art style for Demon Slayer was amazing. I had my issues with. I'm not overly a fan of the chibi art style they use on the characters, but apart from that, there was nothing I could pick out from the art. It was just so sick. The art
Yeah,
style. It looks like multiple watercolor paintings put together into like a massive slideshow. It's amazing. And
yeah,
I thought, okay, they're gonna have trouble kind of putting this on the big screen and making it grander. No, they didn't at all. That art style carried over into the movie, and we watched the subtitle version. They did a confusing thing in the UK where some of the showings were the English dub, and some of the showings you have to look in the small print were Japanese audio with subtitles, and we wanted to watch the Japanese audio with subtitles because it was how we watched the anime. The nothing against English dub. It's just I'd rather carry over how I originally watched it to.
English dubs suck. Don't do it.
Not necessarily. All the new ones are really good. It's not like the old 90s and 2000s ones. They're not like the
They
One
suck.
Piece. They're not like the early Dragon Ball Z and Rurouni Kenshin dubs.
Or was it the fun? What's it called?
Funimation.
Funimation one.
I
Yeah, with
say
like the
that.
sign, you would have like
Me and
a
you
lollipop.
agree that we both can't watch the Dragon Ball Z or Rurouni Kenshin English dub. No, not the English dubs. The Japanese audio.
So
The Japanese, Japanese audio with English sub, because the voices are so high pitched for the
yeah,
main
yeah, yeah.
characters.
Yeah, for Kenshin and for Goku,
You gotta watch those
they
in English dub. Seriously,
they messed up, man.
yeah.
It's so bad.
Well,
And
it's not
that was
messed up.
actually
Like
one of
that's
the
a
things
lot
that
how a lot of
really.
people grew up watching those shows.
Mm,
But like for us, we grew up on Goku sounding a specific way, like and it was very jarring when you hear the Japanese audio. And you're whoa, what the hell?
yeah,
But yeah, that was. I mean, Demon Slayer was a highlight for me last year, and the movie as well. Especially going to watch it was the first anime-related thing I'd seen in cinema. Is there any other anime that you want to talk about? There is one that I want to touch on.
yeah. So I think last year so besides Mugen Train, was it the? I'm not sure if the final season part one of Attack on Titan came out. Was that last year as well? I think it might have been late 2020, maybe.
I think I'm
Um,
fairly certain it did
well, yeah, it might have
early
been. It
on.
might have been last year. Yeah, but that was awesome. Like the second to last season of Attack on Titan, and now we're currently in the process of the latest release of Attack on Titan. So this should be the final season, I think, unless there's like a movie afterwards. I'm not sure how the process is. I've been keeping very detached from it. No spoilers, no nothing. I tend to watch things once all the episodes have been released, just because I can't be asked to watch them like episode by episode, unless it's like something I'm really, really, really interested. But Attack on Titan, the other thing with that is I want to kind of read it as well, because I know that a lot of people were disappointed by the ending, and then there was like this revised ending, I think, and I was like, well, what's going on here? And there's a whole bunch of weird stuff that went on with the Attack on Titan ending. But that was meant to be that was a highlight as well last year, just because Attack on Titan's gotten to that point where Attack on Titan, there's two anime which have really broken the barrier when it comes to noobs to anime. so people who've not watched anything to do with anime like One Piece, Naruto, or Bleach, or anything like that, those being the big three kind of that took over the Western side as well. But with Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, and Attack on Titan, or Shingeki no Kyojin, those for some reason, people I know who've never seen a single anime in their lives took their first step with either Attack on Titan or Demon Slayer,
I know
which was
why.
surprising to me because I'd be like, wow, like,
Netflix.
so like I've known you. Yeah, yeah, it was just weird. It'd be like, I've known you for like 20 years, my guy. And these are the two that like have brought you into the sphere of like anime. So it was weird from that sense, but not that I'm slating those. Those are two good animes to get into. But it was just weird how like it was specifically those two, like, okay, Kimetsu no Yaiba, very kind of shonen-y, but then Attack on Titan, which would like give them a completely different perception of how anime is, because it's very gory, it's very kind of
It's
Game of
different.
Thrones esque.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's a different anime. I'll give it that. Like, and I still need to catch up. I'll be honest. I've only watched the first two seasons, and I
Hmm.
am going to catch up soon. I've made that promise to myself because they're currently airing the final part of the final season. I don't know how
Hmm.
what they've done. They put half of the final season last year, and then they're putting the second part, which is airing now. I believe. I think that's how it works. And I think they were
Yep.
saying maybe they've got like a movie after that. I don't know. We were talking
I don't
about
know.
this. But I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I mean, the other anime, I watched a whole bunch more, but the one that I'll talk about, we're probably gonna make a separate episode just talking at some point if we haven't got a movie to talk about in future, talking about the other anime that we watched in 2021. These are more of like the best of 2021, I'd say, or ones that we thought were worth talking about, whether they were bad or good. Um, the other one that I watched was Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is a classic anime, but I'd not really watched it, and I gotta say I enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't think I would. I some things usually rated high. I usually go in quite skeptical, and I usually get disappointed if I'm honest. But I watched Neon Genesis Evangelion. And I thought, yeah, man, this is really really good. I was warned about the ending. The ending was meant to be a bit rushed. Um, if you kind of go by what they talk about on social media, they were saying the studio who's making the anime ran out of money, so the last 2-3 episodes they were super rushed. And I think the last episode I watched, it basically was a slideshow almost. That's how the art style looked. It was a slideshow more or less. But yeah, I mean the story is about. It's really hard to explain the story. So you've got it's set in like a kind of dystopian type Earth where you've got these like these monsters coming down. I mean, they're not called like monsters, but you got these like giant monsters coming down and terrorizing the Earth, and you got these machines, these robots, which men, or in this case, these teenagers, can control these mechs. Which the thing that was a bit different here to something like Gundam, which I mean, if you guys don't know, Gundams are like full on robots. They're mechanical robots, which you have a pilot going and they're controlling said mech. These mechs in Evangelion, they're kind of biological. They've got like a bit of animal to them. They look half animal, half robotic. And you got these pilots, these teenage pilots who are using them to defend the Earth. They're using them to destroy these monsters, but it's very gory, very kind of more serious in tone than I'd say Gundam. Gundam is more shonen-ish. Evangelion isn't, and there's just a lot more like deeper meaning. They kind of explore the relationship between, how humans deal with, you know, um, how they're dealing with these attacks, etc. It's very good. I won't go too much into it because I know at some point I want to show it and watch it with you. But it's a really cool show. I didn't think I'd like it, and I did. It's very kind of. It's. I think it was in the 90s. It was released, but yeah, definitely worth a watch. If any of you guys haven't watched it, then I definitely recommend it. Give it a go. Go in with
Mhm.
average expectations. I went in with quite high, and I was impressed. Still impressed. Yeah. So. Uh.
Yeah, and then the other one for me was from last year was Jujutsu Kaisen.
Oh yes.
Um, And I think pretty much everyone at this like that was another one where kind of like Demon Slayer, it wasn't as popular as Demon Slayer or Shingeki no Kyojin, um, but it did get very popular very quickly, and
I'd say
this
it's
is
one
one
of
of those ones
those.
where
I think I would say in Japan at the very least, it's one of those kind of Demon Slayer, not quite as popular, but
yeah.
it's up there. It's up there for sure.
Yeah. So the premise of Jujutsu Kaisen is that there are two different types of people. There are normal people which form the majority of people, and then there are these other types of people called Jujutsu sorcerers, and they deal with like demons and all that type of stuff, or what they call curses, which are an accumulation of like negative energy. So, for instance, and this negative energy could be anything, but it's all in relation to like negative energy coming from humans. So, let's say if like humans have a fear of the dark or something like that, all of that negative energy that like a lot of humans fear the dark will accumulate, and a curse will be born from that negative energy, and that curse will be born from that fear of the dark. So they'll have something to do with like the dark, or like a fear of the ocean, or a fear of natural disasters like volcano eruptions and things like that. So that's it's a really cool concept in that sense, but very very shonen-y once again. But the thing with Jujutsu Kaisen is, first and foremost, it's one of those kind of Shingeki no Kyojin esque shows where it's not afraid to kill characters, and it does that in like, it's not even like politely, like it's not like one of those ones where you just hear like a shunk and the character goes and then drops and you're like, oh my god, he died. It's none of that. Like, these characters are dying properly, like limbs are getting blown off, heads are getting blown off, and you're like, shit, God, I didn't expect him to die like that. And then it's one of those ones. But the thing with this is, I have to admit, the story, because I've been reading the manga as well and I'm up to date up until like the last couple of weeks. The story is a little bit difficult to follow because I feel like some of the translation, I'm not sure if it's just the translation to English or maybe it's the translations I'm reading. It's a little bit difficult to follow because I don't understand half of what's being said for some reason. It'll be like they'll be talking and the dialogue just seems off. I'm not sure what it is about it. But the thing with Jujutsu Kaisen is the story is pretty good, the plot is pretty good, but the thing for me that's keeping me really attached to it are the characters. Almost every single character is a lovable character. You have the main character, kind of. He's one of he's a bit like One Punch Man, where the main character isn't really focused on too heavily. It has a focus on all of the characters almost evenly. In One Punch Man, they don't focus on Saitama because he's too powerful, so he would
Yeah,
just end fights quickly and it wouldn't be worth the watch. But in this, the main character isn't actually the most powerful. The main character has a demon in him, kind of like Naruto, but he has a demon in him who can take over should he wish to and clap anybody because he's basically the most powerful demon slash curse that's ever existed.
yeah,
But the issue here is, a lot like Kurama to begin with, a lot like the Nine-Tailed Fox, he doesn't come out to help out the main character even when he's angry. Like with Naruto, he'd come out if Naruto was angry or negative emotions are flowing. This guy does not give a crap. He will not come out if he's dying. He won't come out if anything like that happens. He'll only come out if someone like tries to impose their will on him. So like if they belittle that curse or that demon, he'll be like, nah, 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 cuz what you just say about me, and he'll pop out. But the characters are all lovable. Itadori Yuji, really lovable character. You have the Kakashi-esque looking character his name is Gojo, Satoru Gojo. Or is it Gojo Satoru? He's amazing because he's basically just like, he's like the Saitama of this verse. He's basically all powerful almost. But he's just a complete idiot and he's just funny as hell.
yeah,
So he's really lovable. You have the kind of secondary main characters, which are like Megumi. He's like a little bit quieter, Sasuke-esque, but a lot less cringy than Sasuke. You have Nobara, who's a female character, they've done a really good job in this series, I feel, of making strong female characters, but not sexualizing them. Oh my god, okay, can you believe that? So like
shocking.
really, really strong, really strong female characters like Nobara, like Maki. There are a couple others whose names I've forgotten. There's this lady who controls like crows and stuff like that. Really, really powerful, but they're not sexualized. Like maybe like some fan service here and there on a cover page, maybe. But other than that, they're just really powerful characters. They're not like over beautified or anything like that. Some of them have scars. Like there's one of them who has a scar going across her face like that. Because guess what? She fights demons. She fights curses, so she's gonna get hurt. And you just see them clapping cheeks, and they're doing the business. So I really really like the fact that they have characters like that, just strong women doing their thing and not getting kind of sexualized because they happen to be in like, oh my god,
Yeah.
she did a flip kick and now you can see her panties, and I was like, nah man, like come on, which was all in reference to fairy tale.
I actually need to finish watching Jujutsu Kaisen. I watched quite a few episodes and I just stopped watching it for some reason. I think I kind of stopped watching anime in general for the last month or so. There was a couple of things that I was watching that I finished watching, and some more light-hearted anime that won't go over now. So I mean that's just that's a roundup of anime 2021. Not necessarily that they came out in 2021, just ones that we've watched in 2021. So I suppose the next thing that we'll talk about in terms of highlights is games. Now, like I mentioned to you before, personally, 2021 was just a down year for me on everything, probably apart from movies and possibly music. So I didn't really play many games. There's two games that I want to talk about that we both played together. So the first one I'll talk about is Hades. Do you want to go into that? Explain what Hades is. If somebody hasn't played it, it was basically more. I think it was some people Game of the Year. I think it came out last year. I can't remember whether it came out last year or the year before, but we played it last year, and it was a super successful game. Very popular. Loads of people loved it. What was the game about, and what did you think?
So Hades, funnily enough, is about the Greek pantheon. So the gods and goddesses of the Greek world. So that's Hades, his children, Zeus, Poseidon, Artemis, all these types of gods. He had Dionysus, Persephone, all these gods. And the idea is one of the sons of Hades, I think it was. I forgot what was his name actually. Do you remember his
Zagreus.
name? Zagreus. Yeah. So this son of Hades, he is essentially. I think the main story was he's searching for his mother Persephone, who isn't in the underworld anymore. So he's trying to escape the underworld. And in this underworld, there are multiple levels to it. So you have this first underworld, which is the base underworld where Hades is, and then as you're traveling like kind of along the river Styx, you get higher and higher. You get to like several different layers, essentially circles of the underworld, before you get kind of Hades, who's guarding the kind of gates to the underworld, as well as Cerberus. And that's essentially the story in a nutshell. It's Zagreus wants to get out of the underworld. He wants to get out of Tartarus. It's not Tartarus. It's just the underworld. He wants to get out of there in order to go and find his mother, who he thinks is outside, living on the actual Earth rather than in the underworld. That's
Yeah,
pretty much it.
yeah, and along the way, I suppose what the game is also about is his interactions with the other gods and with other kind of beasts and and that kind of thing from Greek mythology, which was just awesome. I mean, me and you've been into kind of Greek, Egyptian, Roman like mythology that we learned when we were kids. And we used to have like magazines and stuff that we used to look through and read up about. We used to have like the horrible histories books and that all sorts of stuff that we used to read upon. We used to like watching mythology shows. I mean, we had Hercules, which used to come on like daytime television back in the day, like the live action version. We had like the Hercules movie, like the Disney movie, all sorts of other stuff, which kind of nurtured our interest in that kind of thing. So this game in a way for me was really cool just to see that come to life and just to see their version of the gods, the art that they used to represent the characters, coming to life. Now the main kind of mechanic, I suppose, in the main genre of the game is a hack and slash game. It's like an RPG-ish hack and slash. But I think the main kind of genre that people call it is a roguelike game. I think it's a roguelike game. Um, and the kind of common thing about roguelike games is you die a lot, a lot. You die, and the kind of the main mechanic being that you are trying to, as you said, escape the underworld. You go through a certain amount of layers of the underworld, but you're not powerful enough. You're not skilled enough, especially if you first start the game. You're obviously learning the controls. You're learning how the game works, and then you get to a certain point, and then you die. But you've managed to collect coins. You've managed to collect items, all which are used to power Zagreus, your character, up. Whether that be you can unlock other weapons, you can upgrade your powers, you can do all sorts of stuff. And the main part of this game, which was interesting, but I never find it interesting in any game that I've ever played, is that it was randomly generated. So
Mm.
you escape the underworld, and the layers, they have a theme. Whether that's like a fire level, whether it's like like misty, foggy, whether it's like grassland. It's all a theme, but each kind of dungeon that you go into is randomly generated. So there'll be like a random item, and you can kind of steer yourself in a way to kind of choose in general what kind of item that you get, whether you want like a heart, because you have some rooms which have multiple doors. It might be 2 or 3 doors, and on the door it has an icon which says this particular power up is going to give you health. This particular door, if you go through it, it's going to give you coins, so you can use that to purchase power ups. If you go through these doors, you can actually get a power up, and those power ups are coming from, say, God, whether it be Zeus, whether it be Aphrodite, and each one of these gods gives you different abilities, which are really cool. And it's either on your movement, it's either on your kind of light sword attack, or it's on your heavy sword attack, or there's other weapons you can collect as well, like bow and arrow. What else was there? There was like a fist. There was all
Yeah,
sorts.
you had the fist, you had the spear, you had the shield, you had the bow and arrow. What else was there? Those are the main ones I remember.
Yeah. So I mean, that in a nutshell is what the game is about. It's about you trying to escape the underworld and dying an awful lot, and then you have to start right from
Yeah.
the beginning again. So
Yeah.
me and you basically had the same issues with this game, and it's kind of odd, like a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about in this podcast is stuff that we kind of generally agree on. And I know Matrix Resurrections we slightly disagreed, but for the main gist of it,
Like,
we kind of both did enjoy the film. But it's kind of odd. But yeah, once again, this is another game or thing that we more or less agreed on because we were playing on it. We were playing on it together. So, what was your issues with this game?
so I actually didn't for this particular game. I actually didn't mind the randomly generated dungeons. The only time I did mind them was when you'd go through a run through and you'd get absolutely horrific power ups, and then you'd just be like, "Well, I've been set up for failure here. I can go all the way without being touched, get to Hades, get my ass kicked because I have to be basically amazing in terms of reactions, in terms of timing my attacks, because my power ups are so rubbish."
Oh man,
So that was one issue I had with it, but I think for the most part it worked. And once again, just to give props, the game's design in terms of character design, or level design, and the way it played
the
was excellent.
dialogue, the dialogue was
Yeah,
fantastic.
the comedy, yeah, the dialogue, the
Yeah,
comedy,
there's comedic
all of that was
writing.
excellent.
The way
Yeah,
that the story kind of develops left something to be desired, because there's a certain point where you kind of like, well, I'm dying an awful lot and there's not much happening in the story, but what kind of
yeah,
keeps you coming back for more, I suppose, is the dialogue is written
yeah.
very funny. A lot of kind of like English voice acting and that. Yeah, is very
Yeah, I
funny.
was actually surprised about that as well because there were some very convincing British accents
Yeah,
throughout the whole game, and I was wondering actually, I still wonder to this day because I've not checked.
I'm not sure about
Was that
convincing.
studio?
I'm not
Yeah,
I'm
was
not
that
sure about
studio?
convincing, but, but
Yeah, some of them were just like, that sounds like a little overly British.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't know, man. But some of them I was just like, man, like this must have been a game that was designed in the UK because they just had a whole bunch of British accents in particular, and I was like, that's not a choice people would go for in particular. Like, I'm not sure if that's like, we want British accents for this game. I'm not sure if anybody would say that, but for some reason they did with this one.
You get that
So
quite
yeah,
a lot.
I
There's a
didn't
lot
mind.
of British voice acting in games.
Mm,
Yeah, so I wasn't particularly surprised about that, if I'm honest.
yeah, but yeah, the dialogue was funny. The level design, the character design was amazing. The actual artwork was good. And the randomly generated stuff I didn't really mind. What I did mind actually was the fact that the story was so slow moving. You die like once, twice, thrice, and you only get like a small sliver of actual story. And you're like, come on, man! Like with every death, there should be a new bit of story to enough to kind of keep me on the hook, and so you can reel me in further. But it wasn't really like that. There wasn't much story that you were
It's,
getting each time you
yeah,
died.
especially
If
when you
any,
keep in mind when we became good enough, which wasn't good enough, as we'll explain later on. When you become good enough, your runs can easily take anything between 45 minutes to an hour and a quarter. Your one attempt at getting from the bottom level all the way to the top where you get to Hades, it could take up easily up to an hour and a quarter. And so, you'd spend an hour and a quarter and then die and go right from the beginning. And that, as I suppose you're gonna get to, that isn't a problem, at least initially in the game, because you're gaining something, you're getting power ups. But there came a point in the game for us when we'd pumped in probably about 20 something hours into it, at least I think over a week or so. We were playing almost every day, where we just weren't getting any better, and the items and power ups we were getting weren't making us better, and it kind of felt like yeah, we were kind of stuck in a hard place, where you were just like, well, if I play through this again, I'm just gonna die again at this one place. Especially at the end where there was like all those rats and stuff, which just can completely destroy you, because it was just a bunch of kamikaze rats. I mean, yeah, just to go on from that part, really.
yeah. So the main issue we had with the game was that once you get to Hades and through struggle you can beat him, and you'll go to meet Persephone, and you speak to Persephone, and she gives you some lowdown. Oh my God, Zagreus, it's been a
We
while.
didn't
All this
actually
type of
get to
stuff.
Persephone. I hope you realize that.
Yeah, we did. We
Yeah,
did.
so the
Oh,
furthest we got was to Hades. We got to him several times, but at that point, you're so weakened by the rest of the game.
those
And
damn
the
rats.
difficulty of the game, we never really had a problem with. It was a difficult game, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't the thing that we're complaining about. It was kind of like
Mhm.
we felt that some bits of it were against your favor, which made it impossible for you to get it done a handful of times or whatever. I think we said we had about 40 to 50 runs, at least, probably about 20, 30 each. And yeah, that's what I suppose, because we weren't making any progress past Hades, and sometimes dying before getting to Hades again, especially in the later runs that we had, it just became frustrating. So I think what we did was we went onto YouTube and decided, let's see what the ending is like. And what we found out is that you have to play the game 7 times?
No, no, it was more than that. It was like 11 times as
I don't
weird
think
shit.
it was. It
Like,
was you had to play it multiple times, so you get to his mother Persephone, but you have to do it multiple times. And at that point, we were like, "Fuck that!" Like we were
yeah,
so. I was so happy we didn't finish the game at that point. I was like, "Are you serious? You have to go through, luck out in a way that you got the right power ups and the right combination of power ups, right? And then defeat Hades and all those other bosses, etc. And then you have to do it again multiple times."
it
I was
wasn't
just
even
like,
just like once or twice. Like it was something similar with like the Mario the Last World. There was something similar like with that. I forgot which Mario it was. One of the old ones where you had to clock it multiple times, but
yeah,
never to the level of like 7 times or
that one
11
was
times.
just that you have to play the game again, because I think it was like your princess is another castle. That's the classic line. When you
Yeah,
get to the end and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, this is just fake." But that's an old game, like, and that was it's fairly quick. But like I say,
yeah,
this is like, you have to clock it multiple times to unlock little snippets of the story. And in fact,
yeah.
I think there was some cutscenes that we saw where it was just like there was literally nothing to some of the cutscenes. So yeah, it was kind of disappointing. We enjoyed watching the YouTube video to see what the story was, because it was really cool. But yeah, it was a bit of struggle. I mean, I suppose that's all I've got to say about Hades. It was just one of those games which I think was overhyped. It was a fantastic game for what it was, especially the dialogue and the graphics was sick. The gameplay was sick. I enjoyed the gameplay, how varied it can be. You can go through one run through of the game and play it a completely different way the second time, depending on the weapon and the combination of power ups that you have. It's a really well put together game. It just didn't land with me as a lot of people who would like this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, another game that I played with you was an old game, and I'm not sure if you remember. We both played Castlevania Rondo of Blood.
Did we play that all the way through?
Yes, we
Yeah,
finished
yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah,
We finished it, but
yeah.
both you and me, I think I had the last level. But yeah, I mean, Castlevania Rondo of Blood is I think it's a game from the 90s, but it was out on the TurboGrafx 16, or I think it's called the PC Engine 16 in Japan, which was a console which was kind of competing, but I think back then it was putting up a decent enough fight. But it was around the time I think the NES, SNES, Sega Mega Drive, as it was called here in the UK, or Genesis in America, and Master System were around that kind of time. And I think it was closer to SNES because it was a 16-bit machine. It was around the time the SNES and the Sega Mega Drive were out. Castlevania Rondo of Blood is one of the coolest looking Castlevania games going. It's and we played it on the TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine 16, the mini consoles that they have, the little mini kind of emulation consoles, which we bought from Amazon. So they're official consoles. They're like the SNES Mini, the NES Mini, and they have a whole bunch of PC Engine 16 games and PC Engine CD games on there. And we played together on my TV. We took turns, had like a couple of lives each, played through a very difficult game, very cheap deaths, that kind of thing. Very, very old school. It was very much of its time. Let's just say that. It was a really good game. I mean, we had so much fun playing it, and we recorded screenshots. It's I mean, to those of you who don't know what Castlevania games, it's a how do I describe it? It's a platforming game. It's a
Platformer.
It's a side-scrolling action game more than a platformer.
Yep.
It's a side-scrolling action game, yeah. So you're playing as in this game you're playing as Richter Belmont, is it? No,
I think so.
no, it is Richter Belmont. Yeah, it's Richter Belmont, who is a vampire hunter, I believe. Now, I do not know the story of Castlevania. There's people who on the internet who know a lot more about Castlevania lore and stuff like that. But as far as I know, they're trying to destroy Dracula or some shape or form of vampire. And along the way, they come across all sorts of other villains, such as the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper takes away Richter's kind of powers and all that. The main weapon that Richter has against all of these evil ghouls and ghosts is a whip. And the cool thing about the whip is that you can get power-ups to extend it and give you like a lengthened version of your whip. But not only that, you have like daggers, holy water, like crosses that you can throw, and they're all different weapons. Yeah, this game was awesome. I know we didn't enjoy it as much as probably one of the NES ones, but just because of the difficulty, I think there's a certain point where difficulty it becomes a hindrance to your game, and this was one of those games where it was just so difficult.
Yeah.
It's really fun though. All the variation, the graphics for its time. I mean, I've played Super Castlevania 4, which I think is a remake of the original Castlevania, but it's in 16-bit. It's in Super Nintendo graphics rather than the old Nintendo graphics. This, in my opinion, looks better because obviously it's on a CD. The audio, the music's amazing. Do you remember the music?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use the slide technique. There's like special abilities. To me, like from the 16-bit era, this is probably the best Castlevania game from that era. There's like other games like Castlevania Bloodlines as well. I know there's a game that me and you are supposed to have played, which we haven't yet, which is Symphony of the Night.
Symphony of the Night. Yeah, that's the one.
That one is the sequel where you're playing as Alucard, which is Dracula's son. But yeah, give your thoughts on that. Like that was my kind of feelings on Castlevania.
Yeah, I think I have a huge bias for when it comes down to like the old school games, especially the good ones like the Castlevanias, the Sunset Riders, the Contras, or Alien Rebels. The Mario games, all on the kind of the NES, the Turbo Graphics, all these type of thingies.
Ironically,
All those
the
types of
first three that you mentioned were all Konami games, I think.
yeah, it might have been. And then Zombies Ate My Neighbors. That's
Can't remember
one.
whether Sunset Riders was, maybe is that Konami? Can't remember.
I don't remember it being
That
Konami.
was like Palcom, but I'm not sure who owns that anymore. But yeah,
No idea.
Contra is Konami.
Yeah,
Um, so is Castlevania.
yeah. So before they were making like pachinko ball, like parlor thingies,
Machines, yeah.
machines, they were making some banging games on the Super Nintendo, and every other thing. I'm not sure if they were just like specific to Super Nintendo, because they had Castlevania as well.
They had Castlevania Bloodlines, which came out on the Sega Mega Drive as well.
Hmm.
That was a good game.
But Castlevania 4 or Rondo of Blood, whichever one we played, I think it was. Is it 4?
We played the original a lot.
Okay.
The 4 is the one where you can just hold down Y and the.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
played that a bit, but our main experience was the first one, and we still haven't finished the first one. We need to finish it at
Yeah.
some point. I
Yeah.
think we got to the Grim
Yeah,
Reaper and tried it a few times, and for some reason just fell off.
Yeah, but Rondo of Blood, it was sick. The difficulty was next level. Like you'd get touched, and it was one of those games where if you get hit, you leap backwards.
Yeah,
And there's always a very very well placed, well designed hole to fall into. And if you fall into a hole, it's game over, man. You're done.
yeah,
So then you got to start over from like either the beginning or if there was a checkpoint. Most times there aren't any checkpoints. Yeah, so always some form of hole to fall behind, always some weird way to die, but overall, fantastic game. The music was good, the
yeah.
mechanics were always good, which is why I think I have a very kind of I'm biased towards playing games like Hades because they feel almost like you're playing a Super Nintendo game in terms of the controls, in terms of heavy attacks, light attacks,
The simplicity of it.
almost, yeah,
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 simplicity, like rather than everything. I mean, there's a conversation we can have a lot later. I mean, me and you have had it before. Is just everything becoming open world, and you just like, I don't like. There's some people out there in the world, believe it or not, that don't like open world games. Not everything has to be open world, and it's gotten that way. Like almost every single action adventure that you play, or action RPG, is open world. I
Mm.
prefer mine to be more of a linear experience. I want to experience a story the way that somebody's written it. Somebody's intricately, made this story for me to follow. I like, there's a lot of action RPGs where they have open world elements, and that's fine. But when it's completely open world, I struggle quite a bit. Is why I struggled with Skyrim to enjoy that. I think now I accept more open world games. I play a lot more open world games now, and I enjoy them more, but I don't enjoy them as much as some of the games that I've played, which have a more linear progression, more of a you need to go to this ice world, you need to go to this flame world. Like Zelda took that direction as well with Breath of the Wild, where they more or less gave you complete freedom, and I struggled with that somewhat, and I think that was kind of um my kind of introduction into getting into open world games a bit more, because I was like, I'm gonna play this because it's a Zelda game and I'm a fan of Zelda games, so I'm just gonna go through it and try and enjoy it. And I enjoyed it a lot. But as I said to you, in the same year, Super Mario Odyssey came out, which was open world ish. It was more of a sandbox type world, and I enjoyed playing Mario Odyssey more than I did Breath of the Wild.
Mhm.
Even though I appreciate what Breath of the Wild has done in terms of like how many people have enjoyed it and how fantastic the world is. But I preferred playing Ocarina of Time on my 3DS, which is a remake of the Nintendo 64 game. I enjoyed playing that more because that was more of your standard Zelda formula. And there's a place for that still. There's a lot of Zelda fans who still want that that formulaic Zelda experience because that's what they enjoyed playing back in the day, and they want a
Yeah,
bit more of that, but with like a little bit of a spin on it. So I mean, yeah, the other game I kind of played in that vein, I suppose, is, and this will be the last kind of couple of games I talk about. So what I kind of played last year, more or less, was Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the original Final Fantasy VII game. I seem to play that ever since I played it about 3-4 years ago. I played it quite late. I think I've played Final Fantasy VII probably once a year. The original, either on now it's on. I've got it on the Switch, but before that I played it on the PS4. Before that I played it on the PS3. Before that I played it on the PSP. I think I've clocked it on all 4 formats. It's just, is it like I play slightly different each time, and I appreciate it even more. It's become, I know this is strange for you, but it's become one of my favorite games ever to play. And it's one of those because you can take advantage of some of the mechanics in the game. You can kind of make yourself OP. And just in general, it's such a fun game to play and such a fun game to break as well. And just experience the story over and over again. The secret areas where you can get more of the story if you want to. If you don't want it, you can skip the areas. I mean, the first 3 or 4 times I played it, I got there was like bits that I'd missed. So I thought, oh, let's do it this time around. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I played the remake as well, which is not the whole game. It's a bit of it, but expanded. It's still a 30-40 hour game experience. And that was fantastic. I mean, I've talked to you about it a million times. I think the remake. Played it on the PS4. I got the PS4 Pro, so I've been playing it on that. And I also just started playing the DLC, but I need to just sit my fat ass and play that. If I'm honest, the Yuffie DLC, which is one of the characters. The only other thing I've really been playing currently is Phoenix Wright. I've already played the trilogy. I think they're amazing. They're visual novel games where you play as a defense attorney / detective. You're not a detective, but you're basically doing detective things in the game. It's obviously not realistic, but you're being a defense attorney to some really weird and wacky characters. The dialogue in this game is amazing. The localization is fantastic. The translation's been done really, really well. It's super funny, comedic. There's 3 games in the original trilogy, but there's other games in the story as well. There's like a 4th, 5th, and a 6th game now as well. And there's like some prequels that I'm going to be playing this time around. But I'm currently on the 3rd game. Again, I've already played it 2 or 3 times before. They're games that I replay once every 2 years, once every year, something like that. They're amazing. I mean, you've been playing Valorant for basically the last year. I understand. What is it?
Yeah. So I've been very boring in my game choice because for some reason I don't really go play other games as much. Like once I got past like God of War 3, I smashed that. Haven't even played God of War 4. I played Devil May Cry 4. Didn't get to Devil May Cry. Actually, I did get to DMC, but I didn't get to the latest Devil May Cry game because I kind of just looked at the reviews and
which
I was
I
like,
still think you're gonna like, if I'm honest with you.
yeah, I looked at the reviews and for some reason it just didn't feel like a Devil May Cry game. Like I felt like it lost something compared to the original 4. Like the original 4 had something which made them. You can tell just by looking at the design.
Well, you like
The
DMC
characters.
though. You say that
I like DMC in terms of the mechanics of the game, and like the power ups and things like that. I didn't like the story because the story was just
yeah. From what
a
I
bit
can
weird.
tell, DMC is considered even still the worst one probably by fans out of all the games that are out, the mainline games. So
Yeah.
I'd reckon I remember you still enjoying DMC. I mean, I know there's parts of it that you didn't like, so I still think
Yeah.
you'd like that.
DMC was bad just because of how they decided to reboot it. They made it very edgy, very cringy,
Yeah,
and all that type of stuff. The dialogue, the writing was bad. The story was somewhat, but it wasn't really a devil. It didn't feel like a Devil May Cry game. It felt like if someone wanted to make a really edgy rendition of Devil May Cry,
yeah.
that's the game that would have come out, and that's what came out. But yeah, maybe I'll try it eventually. But yeah, Valorant.
I think the main kind
That's
of
what
thing is that over the last 3 years, you've got 3 or 4 years even, you've gotten heavy into multiplayer gaming.
Yeah. So I started off with Fortnite, and that was very simple, just kind of like online mass multiplayer game. I forgot what they call it. What's it
Battle
called again? That
Royale.
type of game is like a sorry.
Battle Royale games.
Yeah, battle royale game. So there are a few examples of that, but Fortnite seemed to be the one that took off. You had Apex Legends as well, which it took off initially, then it kind of simmered down, and now it's taking off again for some reason.
Yeah.
And there were a couple others like that. Fortnite and Apex, I think, being two of the best
Yeah, PUBG
at
was
that
the one
time.
that kicked it all off, from what I remember.
Yeah, PUBG was the kind of OG. But Fortnite was where I kind of started. But I was playing that on PS4. I didn't have a PC at that time, and it was all just building, shooting, all that type of stuff. Very very simple game to get a grasp of, but you can become very very skilled over a period of time, and it can become very enjoyable. And then you're basically just like you're tricking on people and you're smacking them, and it's really really fun. But then from there, I eventually got my own PC. Like, what would it be now? 2 years ago, maybe
Less than 2 years
not
ago, I think.
less than 2 years ago. I
Yeah.
think yeah, maybe less than 2 years ago. Probably about 1.5 years ago, maybe just about. And when I got that, I was like, okay, let's try and get used to some of these games which I haven't played because I've never used a mouse and keyboard. So I went straight into the deep end and I went for Valorant because that had just come out around that time. And Valorant is essentially, if you don't know, imagine CS:GO. CS:GO being it is a first person shooter, right? When you're over the shoulder.
When it's over the first person is when you're seeing, like
Yeah, yeah,
Skyrim. Well, Skyrim can be
yeah, yeah,
over the shoulder as well. So it's not really. It's like third person over the shoulder kind of thing.
yeah. But you don't see your character. All you see are your hand. So it's like that. So it's a first person basically shooter, and it's very very similar to CS:GO in the sense of it's a very very strategic form of a first person shooter.
Yeah,
Usually, you make a mistake, you're gonna die for that mistake.
you did.
And yeah, the way it works is essentially you're playing to first to 13. So whoever gets to 13 rounds won first, that team will win. It's 5v5, and it's very similar to Overwatch in this sense, but also similar in terms of CS:GO. But actually, more to Overwatch in this sense, because the cool thing with Valorant is it's essentially a mix of if CS:GO and Overwatch had a baby, it would be Valorant. And the reason for that is CS:GO is very like it doesn't matter which character you pick. All you're really doing is you're picking an avatar, and what matters is what shields you pick, what guns you pick, and they all have their own specific kind
Yeah,
of things that they can do.
yeah,
But essentially, in CS:GO, once you get enough money, you're all going to be picking the exact same things, unless you have a certain preference for another gun. But usually, you're picking one of either two guns. You're all getting 100% shield, and then you're getting either smoke grenades, you're getting flash grenades, or just normal kind of explosive grenades, frag grenades. So that's how CS:GO is. It's very kind of everyone's basically on the same playing field in terms of what they have,
yeah,
and then it's just all about skill. The difference with Valorant is you have all of that in the sense of you have to be good mechanically at being able to get like a headshot and stuff like that, peaking angles, making sure it's all timed. You can't just run out and like start spraying. It's very Overwatch. You can kind of run out and start spraying and like hope for the best, unless you want to be really really good.
yeah,
Valorant, if you and CS:GO, the thing that you have to do there, and the reason why a lot of people either like or dislike it, is because you have to do something called spray control, which is you can't just hold down the button and expect to hit someone like 10, 20 meters away. You have to hold down the shoot button and then pull your mouse down in order to control your spray
the
and the recoil.
recoil.
So you're kind of controlling that recoil.
Yeah, okay.
So where Valorant is very similar to Overwatch is every character you pick is different from each other. So you might have someone who's described as like a duelist, basically a fragger, an entry fragger. An entry fragger being someone who their whole purpose is to go onto a specific part of the map and to try to gain entry to that part of the map. So they'll try and kill someone so that part of the map is easier to access, and then you go there and you kind of infiltrate the rest of the map, or you plant your bomb there. The whole idea is you plant a bomb and then you guard that bomb to stop the other team from defusing it for like however long the bomb takes to blow up, and
Okay.
they can either defuse it or the bomb blows up. If the bomb blows up, you win. If they defuse it, they win.
All right. All right.
Or if they just kill you before you planted the bomb, they win. So that's how CS:GO works as well. But with Valorant, you can pick a variety of different characters. So you can pick these fraggers, and instead of having flash grenades, you have like flash powers. So
Yeah.
you might throw a flash, in the sky and that would flash someone. You might bounce a flash across the ground and that will flash someone. So they all have like different ways of doing similar things. So each character is different, which is what I felt was cool about it in comparison to CS:GO, which I didn't play that much. So for instance, there might be a character who has smokes, just like in CS:GO, if you have smoke grenades. But in this, there's a character who can throw a smoke, and then you can use your mouse to guide where the smoke lands. Or there's another character who, if you're trying to smoke another area, his name is a kind of you're given like a heads up display which shows you where the smoke could be placed. So then you have to kind of stand still and then place that smoke somewhere, but it's more accurate. So all that type of stuff where you all have like, well, different types of characters, as in different groupings of characters, whether you're a healer, whether you're a fragger, whether you're kind of more of a tactical character or agent as they're described as in this game. You all have similar skills, but those skills are kind of they're projected in different ways. So for instance, like I said, one might throw a flash in the air and then flash whoever sees it.
Yeah.
One might bounce a flash across the floor and then it's like a different mechanic. So that's what it is, and it's just a very, very cool and interesting game because it's made by Riot, which is another cool thing, and they're the guys that made League of Legends.
League of Legends.
And I think they're known for being like very on top of the games that they make. I'm not sure if they're known for being very in tune with like their audiences, but they've been very successful, so I assume they are kind of in tune.
Very
with
much. I mean, they might as well be their like their own kind of Disney company at this point, because the amount of characters they create, they have a very kind of unique way, which other companies have adopted, of like communicating with their fans, and they make a very it's a very much an event whenever a new character in League of Legends is was unveiled, and they say, hey guys, we got a new character in the game. And so they and to balance out these characters, they need to have a very kind of strong form of communication with their fans, whether to nerf or whether to to bump up their characters, that kind of thing. It's a bit like when we were watching playing Overwatch. I mean, that's probably a story for a different day. But me and you when we were living, you were living in Birmingham at the time doing your studies here, and I was living away in Exeter for my first job. We used to play Overwatch almost every single day on the weekdays at the very least. Just to kind of, it was more an opportunity for us, a couple of hours a day, just to chill out together, ask each other how things are going back home, that kind of thing. But that was how we did a little bit of multiplayer game. It's the only real multiplayer game that I've ever gotten into, if I'm honest. And I've told you as much. I very much am the single player gamer. And over the last 3 or 4 years, and as you know, I've gotten heavily into RPG games, especially Japanese RPG games. So the games that I kind of play are like Persona 5. That's the best game I've played in the last 3 or 4 years, probably. Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I need to play 2. I finished playing number 1 at the end of 2020. I thought it was 2021. I played it at the end of 2020. The Wii one, and it got HD remastered on the Switch, and it's amazing. But I need to play the second one, which was made specifically for the Switch. I suppose the next section, I think that's it for games. Like I say, like you gotten heavily into multiplayer gaming. Myself, I've had very down year for pretty much every form of medium. I had a lot of personal stuff that I won't go on, so I wasn't really that interested in. All my hobbies and stuff kind of fell by the wayside. I started picking up a couple of new hobbies, which I'll talk about. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about was the movies that we watched in 2021. So in the UK, and I imagine in other countries as well, because of COVID, all the cinemas pretty much closed down, and they were closed for a very long time. I believe, I can't remember when they reopened, but I'm fairly certain as soon as the cinemas opened up again, we went to watch the film. It might have taken a couple of months, because the thing was, when they opened up again, there wasn't much in the way to watch. Obviously, studios across the world, they've been struggling to, film these movies because of COVID and lockdown. And so a lot of movies that were showing in cinemas when they reopened again was older films that they just showed back in the cinema again. one of the first films that we went to watch, as it turned out, Musi, and I think you were with me. And what we'll do is we'll go a quick summary for some of these films. We'll just, I'll go through some of the, I'll read them out, and we can pick which ones we want to talk about. I've just got like an Odeon page here. Let me just bring it up. So apparently the first movie that we went to watch in 2021 was Godzilla versus Kong, and I'm pretty sure that you went and watched it with me.
Yeah.
That was an awesome film.
That was sick.
So
That was sick.
yeah, so I'm very much a Godzilla fan. I haven't seen every single one of one of the Godzilla films, but I've seen my fair share. I've probably seen probably half of them. Probably about, so there's about, for those of you who don't know, the Godzilla films, there's about 20 something films, probably in the late 20s now, and this is talking about all the Godzilla films that Toho made, as well as the legendary ones that are coming out as well. They're probably going into their 30s now at this point, but they've been coming out since the 1950. I think 1954 was when the original came out, and that is very much worth a watch. But the one that we're going to be talking about, I think it's worth talking about, is Godzilla versus Kong. So do you remember what the film was like, and would you be willing to give a summary, or do you want me to go for it?
So I can give a basic summary of what it was. It was basically just a Godzilla movie. That's one of the things where I feel people have to know going in. If you're going in to see a Godzilla movie, it's gonna be it's a Godzilla experience. It's not like, oh yeah, you expect it to be like a huge, dense story, very complex story to unravel and stuff like that. It's a Godzilla movie. It's a kaiju movie.
You say that, but it took them a long time to get to this point, because the rights for Godzilla in Hollywood were bought out by, I think it was TriStar, and they made that abomination of a Godzilla film. And when we were kids, we thought it was awesome because we didn't know what Godzilla was. We had some Godzilla cartoons, but the Godzilla that we grew up with was with the 1998 Hollywood film, which is nothing like the Japanese Godzilla.
Yeah, it's basically just
it's a small dinosaur
in like New York or something.
It's like a small T-Rex. Yeah, they might as well call it a T-Rex in New York. And yeah, I mean, then when you watch a proper Japanese Godzilla film, you're like, oh, this is more like I mean, the original film was very dark. It was more of a philosophical discussion, as well as a kaiju film, but a philosophical discussion about the effects of nuclear warfare. The film was made in 1954, I believe, right? As I've mentioned like 3 times now. But the kind of significance being, this was very close to the Second World War, and also the bombings in Hiroshima, the nuclear bombings in Hiroshima, and I think Nagasaki it was 2 locations, wasn't it? Yeah, and so obviously this film was made by people who, in the country that they may not, I don't know, some of them may have suffered from it directly, the nuclear kind of effects, or they may have had family who were killed and the like by this horrendous event that took place. But that's what the original Godzilla film kind of explores, and from then I suppose it's turned more into is more of a fun film to watch. It's a kaiju film, which is a monster film, so it's just an excuse to get Godzilla fighting other massive monsters, which are really cool, like characters, really over the top. There'll be like King Ghidorah, which is one of his like main rivals, which is a dragon with 3 heads, a golden dragon which spits out lightning, and Godzilla versus Kong was more in the vein of that. So they've gotten back into what 20 of these odd films have been about, which is fighting other monsters, and also about Godzilla fighting against humans, because he's not always he originally was a terror to humanity. He's not the savior all the time, and in some of the films he is a savior for the humans, but others he's basically a natural disaster. So yeah, go from there. So carry on with the synopsis, really.
Yeah, so I think that's basically how the movie starts, right? Like we have it carries on almost from the Kong Skull Island film, which we also watched last year.
Oh yeah,
we hadn't seen it.
That's true. Yeah, we did watch that
for the first time last year.
That was an awesome film as well.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a better depiction of Kong, in my opinion, than the original Kong movie we got, King Kong.
Peter
Um,
Jackson.
but yeah, but they
Mm.
were kind of different story wise as well in terms of like falling in love with the lady and stuff like that. I'm not sure if we traveled down that route so much.
That the thing is that film falls more in line with the original King Kong film.
Yeah, yeah, and then climbing the Empire State
Yeah,
and everything.
it was quite different still. The I kind of see it as like a reboot slash remake. The Peter Jackson King Kong. This Kong Skull Island was made deliberately for the purposes, I suppose, to have this monster universe that they're creating. So it was very much done intentionally, and this was once again another reboot, I feel. Um, so yeah, I mean the main kind of story. I mean, there's no point really going into the story too much, but it's essentially humans think that Godzilla's being a terror again. So they enlist the help by kidnapping Kong from Skull Island and getting them to fight each other, and
Yeah,
it's just the massive battle that ensues. It's awesome. The fight, the amazing special effects. It's just they went completely to town on the fight between King Kong
yeah,
and Godzilla,
yeah.
and then they
And
introduced
got some lore,
yeah.
like some weird ape lore center of the planet type stuff
Yeah,
going on.
that's the thing. They're
Um,
setting up for this massive like monster universe, and I hope it carries on. I don't know where they're gonna
yeah,
go with it, but I'm all up for finding out. You know, like the more crazy they get, I'm okay with it. This is one of those where you kind of like, you know what, you let your kind of hair down and just go for the experience rather than learning something
yeah,
new. So I mean, they introduced Mecha Godzilla in this film. Spoilers, even though they technically spoiled it in their own trailer, I think by people who like analyzing the hell out of the trailer, and they saw at the corner of their eye like a robot version of Godzilla. Not my favorite incarnation of Mecha Godzilla. He's probably one of the more powerful incarnations, I would say, but I haven't seen all of them yet. I'm talking about the old Japanese films, but the way that he looks wasn't. I prefer the look of Mecha Godzilla in the other films. But yeah, I mean, what was your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm very with Godzilla films. I'm very newbie. I think I've seen like two of the actual Japanese Godzilla films, and they're not even the old ones. Remember, one of them we saw was the latest Godzilla film from Japan
We saw
that
that
was
last year as
released
well.
after.
Godzilla
Yeah,
Resurrection. That was the
yeah,
Japanese's take on rebooting the Godzilla franchise.
yeah. And if
So
you're gonna watch,
yeah,
like, if you want to watch a Gojira movie, like,
Gojira
if you want
movie.
to
Yeah,
see Godzilla being a complete waste man, a complete terror to
that
humans,
was awesome.
that's the film to watch
That
because
is
he
more in
was
line in
kicking
with
the
the
hell out of him.
classic Gojira films.
Yeah,
In terms of that, that was in a way a reboot of the original Godzilla, I believe. I can't remember whether it was like retelling or whether it was like a sequel and they were saying that this is like the son of or daughter of Godzilla or wherever. I can't remember the main kind of storyline for it. I'd have to kind of look it up. But I remember me and you watching that, and there was a particular scene in there where Godzilla just he just causes destruction, and it was amazing the way that they filmed that and shown it. Obviously, it's probably a guy in a suit and like that combined with special effects, but it was just so cool the amount of devastation that they showed Godzilla doing. And I remember me and you kind of watching that and just being like, yeah, this is it, this is the shit.
yeah, yeah. Because I remember for a large part of the film being very confused because it's almost like a Gojira origin story as well.
Yeah,
Because it doesn't start with Godzilla going like you getting the iconic roar and then the iconic music and him just coming out of the water like eh. You don't get any of that to begin with. You get this like
it's a
if you
very
watch it,
slow
you get
build up.
kind of yeah, a very slow build up like this creature comes out the water and it's like all this blood or like red water or whatever is gushing out of it and it's like leveling a city or something like that, but it's not too destructive. And then it's evolving. Then you're like, oh crap, that's Godzilla.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and his design in this just looks very kind of very OG in the sense of Godzilla isn't meant to just look like a huge dinosaur. He's meant to look like a Godzilla, a kind of a gorilla slash dinosaur hybrid kind of thing, because his face is meant to look very gorilla-ish, I
Yeah,
think.
I think once again, this wasn't my favorite design of how they made Godzilla look. Like, he looked very strange in this reboot.
He did
Uh,
look strange, but he looked brutal. He looked so brutal
he,
in
look,
this
he looked
movie.
brutal, but he looked quite
Yeah,
strange, like
yeah,
compared to his other incarnations.
yeah,
But it looked like a guy in a suit. It might not have been. I'm not too sure, like whether they got to special effects,
yeah,
but it looked like a guy in a suit, which was classically Godzilla rather than, the legendary version of Godzilla, as in Legendary Studios Pictures, whatever you want to call them. I can't remember.
yeah.
Which is purely special effects. But yeah, I mean, we had so much fun with that film. I want to watch it again. We've only watched it the once in the cinema. The next film we went to watch was, oh gosh, this one I don't want to talk about unless you do. Black Widow.
Let's give that like a quick 2 minutes. People will probably get butthurt about this, but it wasn't. Once again, Marvel stories. I think we both agree with this now. We don't personally believe that the Marvel cinematic universe is well written in the sense of they're stories which meld together, and they meld together in intelligent ways and stuff.
Yeah,
We don't think they're very kind of complex, very in-depth stories which are, I'm not sure how to describe them. They seem to be very kind of surface level, superficial, other than the fact that there's a lot of comic book lore.
yeah.
Um,
And I think our main problem with it isn't necessarily that there isn't much substance to it. Our main issue is that for a few movies, and it depends on the kind of movie that you're watching as well, I suppose. But you're willing to kind of let your hair down again. I use that phrase just to say, what, I'm just going for the experience. I'm just going to watch and just like not and just turn my mind off. But after 20 or 30 films in this damn kind of universe, you kind of want it's kind of going in reverse where there's less substance to the films, and you're just like, what, I want a little bit of substance, and I want to go away thinking of what's something awesome, not just something that's a rehash of a film that I watched 5 films ago in the series.
Hmm.
And that's where it became for me. And Black Widow was one of the most underwhelming ones, simply because
yeah,
she's not particularly my favorite character in the most cinematic universe. I like the actress. I like Scarlett Johansson. Good enough. I like her in other films more. You still haven't watched Lucy yet. That's
no,
probably not one of people's favorite roles, but I love her in that. I really like that film. I think it's the guy who made Fifth Element.
yeah,
It's one of his newer films. I think it only came out about 5-6 years ago. Give it a watch. We'll watch it together because I need to watch it again. It's a weird film. Weird as that. It's like a anime plot, full on. Like I'm talking about,
no,
where they go
like
off.
Fifth Element.
Yeah, you say
Like Fifth Element.
Probably worse because I actually need to rewatch Fifth Element because I haven't watched that since we were kids.
Hmm.
I know you have watched it since. I think.
No, all I remember is that orange haired girl. What's her name? Lilu.
Lilo, yeah. That's probably because of Venom, but
Yeah, yeah.
but it goes completely off the rails. We won't talk about Lucy in this show because we ain't got time, and I can probably talk about that film all day because it was awesome. But yeah, there wasn't much. I mean, Black Widow's a bit like Batman in a way, but less interesting in terms of she's just a normal human, and she has fighting skills which are amazing, and she's a hitman. She used to be like a mercenary for hire. She was a trained assassin, more or less.
Mm.
And that kind of was the story in a way. It was like giving her a bit of an origin, giving her. I think it was after the events of the Avengers movie where Thanos everybody, and she's trying to pick up the pieces. I think that's when it was based. When was this movie based? Was it?
I can't remember. I don't think. I think this was right after Sokovia. I don't think it was after. I think it's after Age of Ultron. So maybe
Right. I see.
before
Yeah.
the
Actually, you might be
Endgame
right.
or
Yeah.
that. I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah. You might be right, but is giving her a bit of an origin story, giving her some backstory. But to be completely honest, it was kind of boring, And if I'm completely honest, it kind of felt shoehorned. It wasn't a film I felt people particularly asked for. I think there was a subset of a vocal minority who wanted this film. Fans of probably Black Widow, but there wasn't much in there. I feel like for people to kind of just say yes, that was what we wanted. It introduced us to her sister, I suppose. But if I'm honest with you, I think by the time Black Widow came out, I said this to you, I was off the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think after the last Avengers film, I was like, you know what, this is kind of had its course with me. I'm not gonna be invested, and I don't think I was like for the second and third phase. I think for the first phase, I was there, like, searching on Google when we were younger. Like, oh, who's this character? Who's this character? Like, I've not heard of this character. Oh, I know about this character. I know about Iron Man. I know this and this. Oh, who's this side character that I've never heard of? I stopped doing that for the second and third phases, if I'm honest. There was a whole bunch of characters that were getting introduced. I was just like, I don't really care. They're not going to be in this one particular movie that's going to last 2 hours long. And they're probably going to play a really small part in the next movie, which generally tended to be the case. Yeah, I mean, so that was my kind of feeling of Black Widow. Do you want to add anything to that?
Not really. It was just it wasn't a bad watch in the sense of everything was put together nicely in terms of just pure cinema.
Yeah.
And the editing and all that good stuff. It was pretty decent, but the plot was very kind of, like I said, uncomplex, very simple. It was a very simple watch, nothing to actually think about. And then it was all kind of with my least favorite character, because I feel like once again with Black Widow, I don't think that she has much depth. It's like she's a trained assassin, has regrets because she's killed people, sometimes for good, sometimes for maybe more grey things. She believes she's a monster because she can't have babies because her uterus was taken out, or something along those lines.
I'm not laughing at the thing. I'm just laughing at the the backlash that they got from that. You're just like, what?
It was just silly. It was like, oh wait, she's a monster because she can't have babies. Is what she says to the Hulk, and I'm just like, yeah, but you could have said, you think you're a monster because you killed kids in the past for some reason or anything like that. But it's literally, as a woman, I can't have babies, therefore I am a monster. No, that's not all you're there for, man. Like, you've got other stuff you can do. That's not the end all be all for a woman in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but apparently at that time it was. Yeah,
or a woman in
she's
general,
just not very...
or a woman in general. I mean, this film was very much. I remember saying to you, very kind of PC driven. Like I say, I was like, who asked for this film apart from a vocal minority? And I felt that they, along with Captain Marvel, just wanted and Wonder Woman for that matter. Although Wonder Woman was a bit more justified. She's quite a big character in a way. Well, not in a way. She's a big part of the DC universe. Yeah. But it just felt like it was a shoehorn. We need a female-fronted character. We'll make Captain Marvel. And that film was okay for what it was. Completely had a useless part, in my view, in the Avengers films. I thought she would play a much bigger part. We discussed this we've discussed this before. But yeah, it was like it was like they were thinking, we've got Black Widow. She's been in a few of our films. Let's make a movie explaining her backstory. Yeah. And it was just, I don't know about that. The next film I suppose that we watched was, linking on from that in a way, is Shang Chi. I enjoyed that. But once again, I think at this point I was kind of getting a bit disheartened with film, because the only films we really went to cinema to watch, if I'm honest, were Marvel films at this point.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were the only, because that's an easy pick to go out with mates. You go out with mates and you go and watch a Marvel film. You don't need to do much thinking. But I think that's the wrong way to go about it, if I'm honest. And that's only something that I've kind of really thought about and picked up in the last 5 or 6 months, if I'm honest with you. Because I've got my interest back into movies again by watching some of the smaller films and some of the films that I wouldn't necessarily go to cinema to watch. So Shang-Chi was very much, if there's anything you want to say about it, very much standard Marvel fare. It's a new superhero of Asian descent, of Chinese descent. And yeah, it talks about his adventures and how he fits into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Fairly standard story. He's trying to go up against his own dad, who's trying to resurrect his dead mother or something like that. Who he thinks is being held back by this evil dragon. Very kind of Disney-esque. I'll be honest with you. The kind of like the story.
Yeah. It's like, was it like Rapunzel, but like with the dragon?
Yeah, yeah,
It's basically Shrek.
yeah,
But yeah, Shang Chi. I think the way it was done, I liked it, and even though it's like it's Chinese and not like our side of Asia, I feel like we've watched so many Asian movies in the past, like especially all the Jackie Chan movies that we've been through when he was younger. If people haven't watched those,
Oh, you're
we
missing out.
watched so many different types of Asian movies. We know about like Asian mythology through things like Monkey, Journey to the West, and all that type of stuff. Um, so I feel like even though like I'm not I've never been a fan of like this whole representation kind of thing. But with Shang-Chi, I did feel like, oh, this is cool. They've come to Asia to kind of showcase more of our kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was happy with that, and then the lore and stuff, like the how they made it feel. It felt very Asian, and then like when he's at home and he's talking to his grandparent, he's like his grandmother, and he's talking to his
It felt to me very American Asian though, not
yeah,
Asian.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
understand?
yeah,
There's a difference between being British Asian and Asian, like being British Pakistani as we are, or British Kashmiri as we are, and being Kashmiri is two totally different things. So it's
yeah,
very
yeah,
British Asian. The thing, one thing what I didn't like about the film, and it was more of a probably directorial choice rather than the actress, is Aquafina in the film. So
yeah,
fucking annoying, I swear to God. Like it's just the abrasive and the loudness that she's speaking with. I know that you're trying to get out that she's that kind of character, but it
yeah,
really like if you're nitpicking or something, that was so annoying. Just
yeah.
having
And I feel like that's where because the film was very obviously trying to show this divide between, or this kind of tear in identity, or the split in identity between having like your Asian side and your American side. Because the
yeah,
whole point of Shang-Chi is supposed to be that he has this Asian kind of history behind him that Aquafina knows nothing about. All
yeah,
she knows is that he's, what's his name, Bobathan or something, in America, and she's going around driving with him. They're friends forever, and all this type of stuff. But she only ever knows him as the American version of himself, not
yeah.
the Asian version of himself.
I liked
So the
the
movie was kind of
relationship
inviting,
between them.
remember remember your background
Yeah,
as the Asian side of you as well,
yeah.
which was cool. But they then made Aquafina kind of represent America in the sense of that very loud, that very brash
But it was
kind
overly
type
loud. It
character.
was like overly loud, overly abrasive, and it's just like
Yeah,
calm yourself down, bitch. I like the relationship between them. That was pretty cool. Like just to see that just to see the overall relationship throughout the film. But yeah, like you say, I think they were trying to go for like that identity. I'm not sure if they achieved that. If I'm honest, though,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like with Marvel, they focus on so many other things. Like let's try and be funny, let's try and be family friendly. That a lot of that stuff that they seem like they're trying to explore just goes underwater and just becomes completely watered down.
yeah.
Um,
But it was cool from the sense of like I liked the Asian aspect we got from it, and even though there was like a heavy layer of like American comedy and like kind of flavoring over the top.
yeah,
You did still get that Asian vibe beneath, and then like a lot of the imagery they were using, the dragons and stuff that we saw, they looked awesome. The clothing they were wearing, all that type of stuff,
yeah,
really cool. But yeah, I wasn't, like you said, I wasn't a big fan of Aquafina. What I wanted more of was his sister, who was introduced as like this badass character. She could whoop ass, just like how earlier I was mentioning in Jujutsu Kaisen there was
mm,
that female character called Nobara, um, and she's a badass character as well. And I was like, okay, yeah, so the badass female, and then like we're gonna get two females in this, which is like his badass sister who can whoop ass and kick ass and do everything she needs to do. No protection needed. She's basically on the same level as Simu Lee or Simu Lu, I think it is, or what's his name, Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi, yeah,
And then Aquafina is kind of the what's it called,
sidekick,
the
I
comedy
suppose.
role.
Yeah, the comedy relief, yeah,
Yeah, the comedic relief. Yeah. But we didn't get much of that. Like we saw his sister fighting here and there. We saw her helping him out at the end to try and seal away the dragon, or seal away that demon.
Yeah.
But we didn't get to see much of her like actually taking a leading role, like being on a level with Shang Chi. Apart from the fact that he has the rings, and I feel like they missed a step there. But then at the end scene credits, they show her
They
in,
kind
like
of
in
team
charge
up.
of that like 10 ring syndicate thing,
Mm.
almost like they're building up a movie for her.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's cool, but I'm not interested in her. I think from a solo perspective, because I don't really
Not
I don't
seemingly,
really know
they
her.
are, because they said the 10 rings will return. Remember, or wherever it was
Yeah,
called.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they're either
So
making a
I'm not sure if
series or they're making a
yeah,
movie about them, and I was just like, I couldn't give a shit about them.
yeah. So that's the issue I'm having. I'm just like, so basically what you're saying is you fail to give her depth, as in his sister, in this movie, and now you're gonna create like either another movie or a series where you're planning to like do a deep dive on her. But I'm like, but you've not given her enough depth in the movie for me to care about her enough to
Yeah,
then go and want more depth.
yeah.
So I
I
don't
think
I don't understand what the
I think
idea
I've
was.
kind of clocked what some of my issue with the Marvel films is. I think just like when you were mentioning it, I think it's a case of you go to one movie and they make it only substantial enough to the point where they give you a cliffhanger so that you have to watch another piece of
Yeah,
content.
yeah,
But then you go into that other piece of content and it follows the same kind of thing. Whereas we're only going to give you, we're only going to make this substantial enough so that you watch this next thing that we're going to have lined up in the third part of this chain. And that's kind of what they did from phase 1 to phase 3 in the Avengers kind of cycle. Is like I'd say the phase 1 they were enough where you can watch each film individually, and you can be fairly satisfied. But they got to a point where they were like, we need to make people interested in watching the next one, so we'll just half-ass this film,
mm.
and like that'll make them interested. Now it's apparently worked because we're also going to watch them, but the kind of backlash is a way. I still think that there's going to come a point where people are going to get sick and tired of these films.
Mm.
It happens. It happens. It's probably taking a bit more time, but it happens all the time. The franchises don't last forever. So I reckon there is going to come a time simply because their own kind of milking it and the way that they're treating their franchises in a way that it's going to backlash on them in a way. I mean, Spider-Man was good, but that was more of
Yeah,
a
even
Sony
even
film, I
Spider-Man
suppose.
had something wrong with that in
Yeah,
that kind of cliffhanger sense, because at the end of Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage,
yeah,
they showed Venom going into the Spider-Man No Way Home universe, the MCU universe, and then in the actual No Way Home movie, they show Venom for all of like 2 minutes, and that's about it. And they don't even show Venom; they show Tom Hardy
yeah,
as
yeah,
like
yeah.
Eddie Brock, and
So
that
they
was it. It was
technically
kind of like a
lied.
comic relief thing.
So they technically lied. Like you
Yeah,
thought, oh yeah, he's gonna probably play a substantial part in the next Spider-Man film. You just fuck all.
yeah. Yeah, which is, by the way, I thought that was gonna be. I was hoping kind of that would be a thing, because if you've got Venom in a movie where Green Goblin was gonna be there from the poster, we knew Electro I think was gonna be there,
Yeah,
and Sandman I think it was that we saw at least like 2 to 3 villains. I think it was Doctor Octopus. Sorry, we knew it was gonna be there. My first instinct was Sinister Six of some kind. There's gonna be quite a few villains here. So without obviously knowing that there would be two other Spider-Men in the movie, I was like, Venom would be a really sick choice to either be part of the Sinister Six, or for some reason he's helping out this universe's Spider-Man to then go and fight those villains. So I thought, oh, that's a really sick move, but he was just in there literally just to drop the symbiote and dip.
yeah.
And I was like, man, that's some bullshit right there.
Should I read out some of the other films that we watched? So the last two films that we watched were Matrix Resurrections and Spider-Man No Way Home, and we've made videos on that are on our channel. We've got two other videos talking about Spider-Man and Matrix Resurrections in two separate videos. I think I said that twice, but it's all good. the films that we watched last year: No Time to Die, 007, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, Dune, Last Night in Soho. I went to watch that on my ones. Amazing movie. And the original Matrix. So which ones do you want to talk about? We already talked about the original Matrix, I think, in Matrix Resurrections quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We won't
basically, we
go-
got 4 films that we can have a chat about. It's up to you.
So what were they? Last Night in Soho.
Last Night in Soho, that's a film that I watched by myself, so I think we can have a conversation about that, and I would strongly recommend we make an episode about that. Because that was amazing. I thought that was a really good film. Um, so we can probably talk about that one in more detail when you've seen it because it was awesome. Dune, Venom, No Time to Die. I think we could talk about all three of them in some shape or form. So let's start with well, we watched No Time to Die first, but we'll talk about Venom because we already mentioned it. So yeah, this is kind of so Venom: Let There Be Carnage is the sequel to the original Venom film, which came out I think a couple of years ago. Tom Hardy's playing Eddie Brock, who has an alien symbiote, which is attached itself to him, and for some reason, he can actually coexist in some shape or form with this symbiote. This symbiote being like a monster. It's its own kind of sentient being. It's a parasite is the easiest way to explain it. And I suppose the kind of synopsis for this film is that there's this prisoner called what's his name? Cassius Marsh. Is it?
Cletus Cassidy, I think.
Cletus Cassidy, not Cassius. Cassius Marsh is an old Patriots 49ers player from the NFL. For my life. Yeah, no, you're right. Cletus Cassidy. Sorry, my mind was somewhere else. Yeah, and he's. Did he have some kind of history with Eddie Brock in this film? Originally.
No, it was literally just he wanted Eddie Brock to kind of report on his case and kind of
Before he gets sentenced to death.
yeah, before he gets sentenced to death. But then what Eddie Brock did was he actually solved the murders and he brought forward, I think, Cletus Cassidy's death sentence.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, so I don't think he was originally sentenced to death. I think he was just in prison, and then he got sentenced to death as a result of Eddie Brock finding out, through his investigation that he killed these people, etc., and he had proof. What that eventually led to is just before he was about to get, fried in a chair, electrified. He bit Eddie Brock, and some of his blood went into Cletus Cassidy, and so in turn some of the symbiote went into Cletus Cassidy, and he turns into Carnage. Carnage being in my opinion, one of the coolest villains in Spider-Man lore. He's, so Eddie Brock is more. He's a bit of your kind of average Joe, where he's a bit of an anti-villain, right? He's a likable guy, but he has his flaws. But he's a good guy at heart.
Anti-hero.
Yeah, he's an anti-hero, anti-villain, anti-hero. Yeah. He's always shown to be like a bad guy against like Spider-Man, but obviously in the comics and stuff he doesn't like Spider-Man. In this, the kind of weakness I suppose in the Venom films is that there's just no link to Spider-Man at all, which made it very odd that they did it in the kind of ending scenes. But anyway, Cletus Cassidy, he turns into Carnage, and he's a straight up serial killer. He's just a madman. So he's got the symbiote, and he's a lot more dangerous simply because he's just crazy. And he's willing to kill people to get what he wants and to be happy and all that. So, I mean, fairly simple story is him trying to defeat Cletus Cassidy in order to get, the symbiote off him and to protect his loved ones and that kind of thing, and also to keep himself safe. Yeah, anything you want to add to that?
No, pretty simple story. Just Venom accidentally creates Carnage. Carnage comes to town. Carnage wants to get his girl free. I think her name was Screech or something like that.
Yeah,
was she Screech?
Something
I
like
think
that.
there was another. Her abilities were to do with screeching, but I think there's another symbiote called Screech. I can't remember. But he tries to go marry his girl. This is Cletus Cassidy and all that type of stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of beef that goes down. Venom sees Carnage, like, oh crap, that's a strong guy. But it was just super cool because like I've personally been a fan of Carnage, and I know you have as well, since we were kids and we first saw Carnage in our Marvel Ultimate Guide, which wasn't the comic books per se. It was more like a wiki in book form.
It's an encyclopedia.
Encyclopedia of all the heroes and villains in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
One of the pages that I always return to were Venom and Carnage because they were symbiotes, and I was like, ooh, these guys look so cool. They're very Spider-Man-esque, but then they have their kind of evil side, and Venom he just didn't like Spider-Man.
The thing that made it
So Carnage is
cooler,
always one of my favorites.
right? Just to interrupt. The thing that made it cooler was the actual book itself was in full color, in a glossy photo paper, and it was bigger than A4, double sided. So the Carnage page right in the middle had like a splash of a massive, artwork of Carnage, which just looked awesome. I don't know who it was by, but that was one of the things that we used to go and look at. Do you remember all the time? Just open it up just to see that picture.
And his color scheme is just like perfect. If you're gonna go for a villain,
Black and red,
especially in something like that, red and black, you can't go wrong. And the black is always shadow, but Carnage always just looked awesome. So the fact that we got to see him on big screen, and the fact that the actor, I've forgotten his name, did a good job of actually being Cletus Kasady and then by extension Carnage, I was really happy with their choice of casting there, and also their choice of actually putting Carnage in a movie.
I would have been able to tell you from the top of my head what the actor's name was before right now. I can't remember his name right now.
He played Tallahassee in like Zombieland. And
yeah,
stuff like
he's a fantastic actor, and I can't.
Yeah,
he's just completely gone out of my head. But yeah, it was a perfect choice. I remember at the end of the original Venom, when they showed a quick scene at the end where they showed Cletus Kasady, and I thought, oh my god, this is gonna be amazing when they show him. And I didn't think they were gonna make a sequel, but they did. And I just thought, yeah, this guy's perfect for him. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the film enough. Wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was just, I think for me, it was just an opportunity, like you say, to see Venom and Carnage on the big screen. There's nothing really more I want to add to that. It was an okay film. I think just above okay. I think I said to you, I'd probably give it about 6, 7 out of 10, probably.
Yeah. But it's like a solid 6, 7 where you knew it was going to be a 6 or 7, but it was still worth the watch because you knew what type of movie you're going to go in to watch.
Yeah, I think we probably gave it higher simply because of personal reasons for the characters that we liked and we wanted to see. Story wasn't groundbreaking. Effects were. I really liked the way that they filmed certain things, like how they had Carnage in the dark. I thought that was really cool. We talked about that. Yeah. I suppose the next film that we can talk about is Dune, unless you want to do a whole episode on that when the second film comes out.
Is there a second? Oh yeah, oh my god, there's a second. I forgot there was a second film coming out for that.
Do you want to do the episode for Dune when the part 2 comes out? If we're still doing this podcast?
we can do kind of a whole episode on both things, but we're gonna have to rewatch the first one.
Exactly. We want to rewatch that anyway. Remember, because we were saying that there was a bunch of stuff that we missed.
Yeah.
So
I'll just give like a slight kind of view of.
You have read the book, so you might as well give like an overview, and we can give our quick feelings on it. But we will probably do a more kind of breakdowny, analysis-y type thing, and a more detailed discussion when part 2 comes out, which I think is coming out at the end of this year or next year, something like that. So stay tuned for that, I suppose. But in the meantime, go for it.
Yeah. So the book Dune is about, and this is me gonna have to remember like these characters and stuff. It's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones and stuff like that would be reminiscent of this. You have houses and things like that, noble houses, which some of them have beef with each other, some of them don't, and all that type of stuff. But basically, there's this kind of imagine like Star Wars, but pre-Star Wars. I think this book was written in like the 50s or the 60s, so it's quite an old book.
60s.
The first one of the 30s.
But I'm not sure if it predates Star Wars, if I'm honest.
But it's in that same kind of that has that same kind of vibe and that same kind of tonality in the sense of intergalactic travel and things like that are bread and butter in this universe, and there are multiple families and stuff like that which we need to know of. But the two main ones are the Harkonnens and the Atreides, because they're the ones that we're following in the story. The Atreides aren't like a huge family, but they're a well-respected family. They're known for being like their military is meant to be very, very well drilled, one of the most well in the entire verse. And then you have the Harkonnens, who are very, very rich, and they're kind of like the lapdogs of the emperor of this universe. And that's because the Harkonnens own the planet, the desert planet known as Arrakis. which is also colloquially known as Dune. And in
All right.
basically the book,
Is it? I
sorry,
didn't realize that because
yeah,
I don't think they mentioned that in the movie.
they might have mentioned it, but you know when they're going through it and the dialogue and stuff like
Well,
that, you
especially
probably
when the
didn't.
dialogue's on this coin, you don't really know what they're saying, and you know what the hook.
Yeah, so Arrakis is Dune, and that's what the planet is. The planet is called Dune or Arrakis. Now, the whole movie and the book starts off with the ownership of Arrakis or Dune has been exchanged by order of the Emperor. The Emperor has said the Harkonnens have had their time on Dune. Now the Atreides have their time on. Now, in the first chapter, the Atreides are basically, I think it's in the first chapter, they're discussing how this basically could be a trap set up by the Emperor, basically leading the Atreides into a task that they can't complete or that they can't possibly fulfill, and then they'll be basically pushed into very difficult political landscapes, and maybe kind of their family will be in danger because of it. But the head of the Atreides family, he's very kind of he's kind of like the Ned Stark, very upright, very loyal type of character. But he feels, yeah, you know what? If I just put my efforts in this, this is something I can do. We can go ahead and do this. Now the whole kind of importance of the planet Dune or Arrakis is that it makes this product called well, there's a natural resource there called melange, or otherwise known as, I think they refer to it as the spice.
Yes, yeah,
And
the spice, yeah.
yeah, so that thing is literally like it's the most valuable thing in the whole universe, and it can only be produced on Arrakis, and that's where they mine it.
What is it? Is it like energy? Is it
No, it's
just?
quite literally like a physical substance. It's like a powder, I think it's meant to be like an orangey powder.
But why is it so valuable? Is it just something that they trade with? What is it? Is it like something
Yeah,
that can be burnt as a fossil fuel, as energy? What is it?
yeah. So I think this actually goes beyond the scope of the first book, but you do actually begin to learn of it in the first book, because I haven't read past the first book, and I don't think I will. Um, but the whole value of melange and the fact that well, the reason why it's so important is, first, whoever takes it it's meant to be extremely addictive, so the people that take it get hooked on it big time. But then I think it's also got a quality to it which allows people to exceed their kind of computational ability. So basically, people start they start to compute things like a computer. So it essentially eradicates the need for machines. I think that's kind of part of the overall story of the Dune series, which is they're in a world where machinery, and I think it was machinery and stuff, isn't necessary because they have the spice, where they can calculate. I think they mention it at the beginning of the movie as well, because of the spice, intergalactic travel and stuff like that, and navigation has become easy for these people because they're using this spice to basically process all of the information and then travel through space easily or something like that.
Okay.
So it's basically it's almost like a drug that allows them to process things at an exceptional um, rate and an exceptional level. So that's what they're mining, and essentially what it is cutting a long story short. The Atreides family go take over Dune, take over Arrakis, and they know that they're on the planet are already a group of people, the native people called Freeman or Fremen, I think they call them in the movie, and the Fremen or the Freemen, they're the natives. They know all about spice. They know all about its properties and stuff like this, I think. And they know how to traverse the deserts of Arrakis, which the majority of the planet is made up of, which is a very valuable skill to have because the deserts have what you saw in the movie, those giant worms going through the desert. And the only people that know how to successfully cross the deserts are the Freemen, whereas everyone else is shit scared of those deserts. It just so happens to be that the spice can only be mined in those deserts, so that's why the Freemen are so kind of valuable. But they're also a fearsome people because you don't know which side they're on. They might just come up and kill your whole squad if they feel that you've offended them in some way. So then, what the story is about is basically the Atreides go there. They're trying to create like some sort of partnership with the Fremen. to say like, okay, we need to mine the spice, but let's try and be colleagues in this, and you will scratch your back if you scratch ours. But then essentially the Emperor and the Harkonnens work together to send down a huge force, to destroy the Atreides while they're on Dune.
Yeah, and the main character of the film, just on the sideline, is one of the Atreides. He's the prince. What's his name?
So he's the kind of the heir to the Atreides family,
Yeah.
and his name is Paul Atreides. Otherwise, the actor is known as Timothy
Chalamet.
Chalamet.
Yeah, Chalamet.
Chalamet. Yeah. So Paul Atreides is the person
Just
we get the view.
Just on a quick side note, when we were watching the film, I couldn't believe that the main character in this cool ass looking film was called Paul.
Paul.
Just on a side note, I was just like, oh, okay. I mean, nothing against the name Paul, but it just sounded like a very non-sci-fi type name. It was just, hey man, it's Paul. Is Paul and his mandem, yeah. Paul and Atreides, and you're just there like, all right, but
yeah, it's like compared to the Aragorns, the Frodos.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Aragorns.
Luke Skywalker, like very sci-fi type films. Then you got Paul, and you're just there like,
yeah,
all right, Prince Paul, okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So then essentially what happens is the Emperor and they send down a force of what they call the Sardaukar, which are basically the most elite warriors. And that's one issue I had with the movie. I'll come back to this to actually do it. The Sardaukar, the most elite people in terms of military might in the universe, look like absolute plums. They look like the most untrained people I've ever seen.
They look like, the putty fighters from Power Rangers.
Yeah.
The putties, the grunts basically.
Yeah.
In Power Rangers, it looked like that.
Yeah. So I was like, man, if you're gonna, the Sardaukar are meant to instill fear. Like people hear Sardaukar and they shit their pants. Literally, their rectum will evacuate whatever was stored behind it. And I just wasn't getting that from the Sardaukar when we saw them. But essentially, they invade Arrakis, and they destroy the Atreides family and stuff like that. So the Atreides family are all separate, and the head of the family has been taken hostage. Eventually dies, and then it's essentially what happens from that moment forward. Because what happens is Paul, we find out from the beginning of the book, is a special person. He's there's legends and stuff about him already on Dune. The native people know of him for some reason. You discover why.
Is he prophesized? Like they have prophecies and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's been prophesized.
They think that he's the one in the prophecy. A lot of the Fremen and just a lot of the people in general. They're very aware of his existence and that he might be this person who fulfills this prophecy.
Yeah, and this is where a lot of like Islamic theology comes in as well, because they're referring to him as like the Mahdi. And there's a lot of, even in the book actually, there's a lot of Arabic language like taqwa. There's the Mahdi. There's what else is there? There's ilm al-ghayb and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And some of the words like ilm al-ghayb, which is the knowledge of the unseen, I think it is. I think that was used correctly. But words like taqwa and stuff like that, they were used so poorly in the books as well. It's like it was just like, oh yeah, oh my god, can you see it? It's happening, the taqwa, and you're just like, what?
Like, we had fun jokes about that. Me, you, and Yasin.
Yasin, yeah.
Yeah, we were just using random Arabic words completely out of context. I mean, our Arabic knowledge isn't amazing. I mean, especially mine. I don't know half. Most of the Arabic words mean. I don't know. But we just had good fun after watching the movie, just saying I'm going to pick up my al-ghaib from school tomorrow. And,
So things like that. There are a lot of Arabic words which were just like thrown into the book, and when I was reading them, it's weird because I'm imagining like people not from like Africa or where the Arab countries are, Middle East maybe, and from some Asian countries. Everybody in the rest of the world, so like the Western world, Europe, all that type of stuff, Eastern Bloc, Australia, all those places, New Zealand, where this book is seen as like a classic, and it was a very well written, very good book, very old style though, so very slow burner.
Yeah.
They must have been reading this. I'm thinking, ooh, that's some sick. Like he's got his own language. It's very kind of Lord of the Rings esque in the sense of, you know, he had his own language as well. And then you have someone who knows a little bit of Arabic or who actually speaks Arabic, like a lot of people would from from the Muslim world,
Yeah.
and they read this and they're just looking at it like the book's been good, but what the hell is this random like this is just completely dismantled and destroyed my language
Yeah.
to a point where you're just like it's like taking random English words and just slapping it in the middle of like a French sentence, and you're like, wait a sec, none of that makes sense.
We'll
So that
go.
was a bit weird.
We'll go into that in the full episode. You might as well finish off the recap.
Yeah.
We're already at the 2 hour mark. So
Yeah. So then it's basically about Paul Atreides is now technically the master of the Atreides family, but the entire Atreides kind of troop and the people that he knew are all spread out around Dune, Arrakis. They're maybe not even on Arrakis. So then it's about him kind of going to the Freemen, trying to convince them of his Mahdiness, which they pronounce in the movie as the Mahdi.
the Mardiness. Yeah,
The
having a
Mahdi.
Mardy, mate.
Yeah, so he's trying to prove he's having a Mahdi, and then it's basically in how can he convince them and be in partnership with them to regain control of Arrakis,
Yeah.
but then to overthrow the Harkonnens and the Emperor who betrayed his family.
Yeah. So I went in with very low expectations on this film because it just looked like they'd spoiled the whole film in the trailer, and that was somewhat true. One of the best scenes in the film was when they showed the worm, the massive giant worm, come out in the middle of the desert, and they showed that whole thing in the trailer. I would have loved to have seen that and experienced it firsthand without having it ruined for me in the cinema, because it still looks spectacular. But I was like, but I've seen this in the trailer. Damn you, trailers. But yeah, I actually ended up finished the film, and I actually really enjoyed it. I was interested in watching the second film. However, what it did put me off was reading it. I watched the film expecting it to be a particular story, and it was something different from what I expected. I thought it was going to be science fiction. It was more of a kind of political story.
Yeah.
Well, you don't generally like, but because of the sci-fi elements interwoven and the lore, it actually got me really interested in seeing what they've got for the films. But I wouldn't have liked to have read about it, especially an older book, which I struggle sometimes to follow.
Before we went, I think I set that expectation for you as well, because one of the things I said to you after the book was, by the way, I know how you like with politics of Game of Thrones like that.
Yeah.
And even the politics of like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that in the books. I was like, it's very political. This book is very, very political. There's a lot of political. There's a lot of deliberation and all that type of stuff. The thing I didn't like you said, was why do they have to show the worm in all of its glory? Like, they could have just showed like the sand like rising, like as it's approaching something, and people would have been like, oh crap, what's that? That would have been cool. And there were two other things I didn't like. Remember when I was saying, what's the character, the Duncan Idaho, who the guy who plays Aquaman, what's his name? Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa, yeah.
Yeah, so they made his character someone who's really friendly with Paul in this movie. That's not how it is in the books, so we'll save that for when we actually talk about it. And then the fact that they changed that doctor, remember the black lady? I've forgotten her name as well.
I can't remember.
Do you remember? I can't remember her name, but there's a doctor in the books, Doctor something, and he's a male character. And part of the nuance of the books and kind of the Arab-ish kind of undertone is that it's a male character. And in the movie, for some strange reason, they made the character a black lady. Now, whether they were black or not, that's fine. I think even in the books, they might have been a tanned character, maybe even a black character. But the fact that they turned him into a lady, I thought there was no need for that, as in story-wise. So why did they actually change it? Which is something that got on my nerves.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, like I say, I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought. I think it was, setting my expectations of what the film was going to be like. Just from the trailer, there was a lot of desert, so I thought, oh god, this is going to be like a really dreary film. But it went on a bit, but it got me interested in seeing the second film. Which was even more strange because I remember you were reading the book the week leading up to when we were watching the film, and then I think a day or two beforehand, I found out that the film is actually half of the book.
Yeah, yeah,
It only
yeah.
covers half of the book, and you were just wondering like how the hell they were gonna do that, because nothing of importance to you had really happened. And I think that is the one criticism that I have of the film overall, and we'll go into it in a lot more detail, like kind of scene by scene if we can when we watch it again. But it is that not much in the way, not much, nothing. There are a couple of big events that go down, but other than that, not much happens. They could have fainted a bit more, but I appreciate that they covered a lot of the character progression, and a lot of the backdrop was done in that 2.5 hours or however long the film was. So that I appreciated why they did that. Yeah, in terms of movies for 2021 in cinemas, at the very least, that is pretty much it. And I think that's pretty much all we got time for today. We've actually gone over time. I mean, once again, this was just a recap of some of the things that we did in 2021, some of the media we consumed, and a few highlights that we wanted to pick out to talk about. There's a lot more that we can probably talk about. I've got a lot more anime that I watched on this list that we'll probably discuss and talk about. In future, we'll probably make a separate episode when we don't have a particular movie that we want to talk about. But in the meantime, guys, take care, and thanks for tuning into this week's episode of 1000 Calorie Cheese Sauce. We'll see you again next week. Goodbye.
Peace.